Let's try that again. Let's see if that worked. Oh. Okay, I think I'm ready to go. This is a little bit of an unusual episode, but welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowski, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how to come up with ideas. How do you get started? How do you take an idea and develop it into something? And what do you do when you run into a wall or you stall out and you lose interest? And so how do you complete an artwork? So we're going to talk kind of about some of the thoughts that might go through an artist's mind while they're trying to come up with an idea and how to get from point A to point Z. Okay, I've been thinking about this episode for a long time, and I'm really excited to finally tackle it here. So the name of the episode is how to choose what to paint or to draw or to sculpt or to sing or write about. Where do ideas come from? So here's kind of the overall plan for today, kind of talking about the different steps involved here. But we're going to go through each one of these individually and dissect them and help you understand how to come up with an idea. Just quickly before we do so, consider liking, subscribing, hit the notification bell so you know when these future episodes are going to take place. If you want to support the channel with a small donation, a couple dollars, the price of a cup of coffee or something like that, that would sure go a long way to help keep the lights on and pay for the internet and make these episodes more frequent than they infrequently are currently. So if you scan that QR code for the PayPal or enter in that web address there, it'll take you to a page that looks just like this where you can safely and securely donate to support the channel. And thank you to those people who've been supporting the channel for over 6 years now with these weekly live streams. If you don't want to use PayPal or you got an alternative method that you'd prefer, you can certainly use an e-transfer via email or send a check or money order in the mail or use the YouTube Super Chat while we're here live. You can contact me via email by going to the Facebook group and my website. Those links are down there below. In fact, the Facebook one is the first one there. And speaking of the Facebook group, here's the QR code to scan to go to the Facebook group so you can get an idea of what future episodes are going to look like, as well as see artwork that people like yourself have created. Once a month or every 6 weeks or so, I go through everything that's on the Facebook group, whether that's drawings or paintings that people have created in class, outside of class. Again, I can still give people free feedback on the drawing series that I created 6 years ago that is immensely popular. So I'd love to see what you've created. It's a super awesome community of people from around the world who are all at different stages of their creativity, of their creative journey. And it's a great way to get some support and find some friends. I know there's lots of friendships that have grown out of that group, and it grew spontaneously out of conversations in these classes. So that's what the Facebook group looks like. In every episode, I do a little bit of a post or biography about the artist or artworks we're about to tackle. Okay. So, going back here to the subject, how to choose what to paint. How do you come up with an idea? So everything's got to start somewhere. So like a fire begins with a spark. So we need to find something to spark that idea. So it really doesn't matter where you start. You could pick a person, an animal, an object, a color, a smell, a taste, a feeling, a mood, a memory, a place, a time, anything, a random word, whatever it is, it's a starting place. And it could even, ultimately, what sparks an idea might disappear and become totally irrelevant. We're just using it as a first step. So you don't want to get too hung up on what that spark is, just finding something. Because sometimes you make art that is the opposite of where you start. Right? So if you're watching right now, I would love to see in the chat there if you just throw out some basic ideas of a person, an object, a color, smell, a place, time, because I can use that as we go forward to help develop ideas. So, as I said, this spark can be anything. It really doesn't matter. Now, I put there that it could be something random, like literally you could just open up a book and flip to a page and say, modern westerns, right? Okay, that could be the beginning of an idea. What does modern westerns mean? Well, I could read this text, or I could just take that and go modern westerns. That's my first idea, right? So, we start with an idea. Now, sometimes people are more programmatic. They've already got certain themes or ideas in mind, and that's great. But if you don't have an idea, you don't have a starting place, then just pick something at random. Okay. Hi there, Ari. Hi there, Tatiana. Nice to see you guys there in the chat. Okay. So if you've got any ideas, throw them my way, because I'm going to use them here any moment. So what are some basic ideas? So step 2 is we want to add fuel to that spark. We want to activate the spark. We're trying to create a fire, right? So a spark on its own is nothing, but a spark plus fuel, some sort of catalyst to get this thing going, is what we need, right? So we're going to take our spark, we're going to add it to our catalyst, right? A spark plus gasoline, spark plus newspaper, something that's going to create an ignition. So for instance, I'm going to show you a big list of catalysts here in a moment, but we could just pick something random, like my favorite dog, right? It could be a specific kind of dog. It could be Border Collie or Pomeranian or Husky, or it could be a dog from a cartoon, a TV show, or a dream. Wherever it comes from, that's our spark. And then the catalyst is something we're going to use to test, to activate that spark. And this is just an example here. Focus on negative space, as we'll talk about here. But that's the main idea. Spark plus fuel, let's go. So, next thing I want to talk about here is I'm going to give you a list of 100 prompts, creative catalysts that help you get that spark ignited. I've created a free PDF which you can download off of our Dropbox folder, and you can scan this QR code or enter in this web address there, and it's going to take you to a Dropbox folder that is entirely free. How do I get there? Okay, so if you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to a page like this. And this is our Dropbox folder that contains over 1,000 different outlines for different paintings and drawings that you can create. You'll notice that they're all by level of complexity. We've got intermediate, novice, beginner, and advanced. So number 1 being beginner. Let's see, there's a beginner episode here. So here's Charles M. Schultz, Charlie Brown. Here's a level 1 beginner drawing. Then there's Child Hassan, who was a great American Impressionist painter. There's a novice painting, a Claude Monet novice painting. And then we've got Intermediate by Monet, and then Cornelius Krieghoff, a great Canadian genre history painter, and he would be an advanced, right? So we've got all these different things here, but at the very top, we've got the basic supply guide to get started, the first episodes learning how to mix a color wheel, talking about color temperature, painting the value scale, and this is where today's PDF is located, under how to choose what to paint. So this is all about coming up with ideas. So if you want to download that, it kind of has all the information I'm about to talk about on screen in a nice organized fashion. And I'll just say right off the top, a lot of this is inspired by one of my favorite artists and musicians, Brian Eno. And he collaborated in 1975 with another artist, Peter Schmidt, on a set of cards called Oblique Strategies. And it's like you see on the screen there, it's a deck of cards, and each card has a little sentence on it. And the idea being is if you run into a wall creatively, you can pick out one of these cards and it gives you some sort of catalyst. It gives you an idea of how you could move beyond, break through that barrier, or overcome that stall. So the list I'm about to go through is inspired by it. I think his are, I would say, even more oblique than what I've got. Some of them are kind of strange and very poetic. I've tried to make them maybe a little bit more literal for people who might be a little bit more new to this kind of thing, also a little bit more accessible, but I think definitely 100% owe a great deal of this to Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt. Brian Eno, also an incredible musician. If you haven't heard any Brian Eno music, it's great stuff to paint to and draw to, very atmospheric kinds of sounds for the most part. He's also known as a kind of experimental musician too, but I think it's great for being able just to kind of disconnect your mind from the more literal world. Anyway, I'm going to go through all 100 of these, just so you can kind of get an idea of how you might apply these different catalysts to a spark. And there's 10 different kind of categories. They're all kind of grouped into different sort of maybe themes or approaches here. Oh my goodness, look at all the comments. I'll get to that here in a second. Let's get through a few of these first. So the first one is the first one here is disrupting the expected. So we could start with the least important part of the idea. So if I go back to the idea of my favorite dog, well, what would be the least important part of my favorite dog? And each person would come up with their own idea, but I don't know. Is it the dog's tail, or is the most important part its face or its personality? But even just there is like, okay, how could I make an artwork about my favorite dog in which its face or head is blank or missing, right? Then what does that mean? Is that terrifying or weird, or right? But immediately right there, there's a whole bunch of directions in which we can go from. Remove the element you like the most, right? So again, kind of similar, but actually, number one, I said, what is the least important part? I just said the most important part. So, but you can see how these are going to flip-flop back and forth. Remove the element that you like the most or hate the most. This is, something kind of inspired. Picasso would often say something like, if there's something you really like about a painting, paint it out. And if it's really that good, it's going to resurface, right? And that's something you often see with artists is if you tell them you like something about their artwork, that's the thing that they're probably going to change, just because artists are difficult. Make the background the subject, right? If you're struggling to come up with an idea, take a photograph of something, and instead of painting the central subject or person or object in there, paint the background. What would it look like if we took that right out, the so-called most interesting part of the picture out, and focused on the boring thing in the background. Think about Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. Before Starry Night, nobody was really that interested in painting skies, right? Vincent van Gogh makes the background the most important part of that painting, revolutionizes how we see the sky. Treat the mistake as the plan, right? So if something is going wrong, amplify that mistake, embrace that mistake. Bob Ross talks about the happy accident. Transform that mistake into an opportunity. Number 5 is flip the composition upside down and continue. If you've done the drawing course with me, you know that that's a strategy. We can take a drawing, turn it upside down, and continue working on it. Maybe that makes it unfamiliar and gives you an opportunity, helps get over some of the fear of making it perfect. Because if it's upside down, probably not going to be perfect anymore, so we can let go. Number 6 is using the wrong color on purpose. This is something I ask my students, like often really young students, to do when they're painting portraits. As I say, you're painting a self-portrait, you can use any color except the right colors, right? So you can't spend an hour trying to mix a perfect skin tone, because you're not allowed to use that skin tone. If your skin is let's say blue, you can't use blue. You've got to use any color except blue to paint that face. And when I do that with little kids, often that's so exciting because it just feels so liberated. It's like, oh, wow, I have to be creative right now. I've just been told I can't do it right. I've got to use my imagination. And that can be so liberating. Simplify until it almost breaks. Well, go back to the idea of a dog. What can I remove? How can I simplify a dog till it's basically not a dog anymore? It loses its dogness or dogness, whatever it might be. What is the last moment before that image is no longer a dog and it becomes a blob or it becomes a cat? Where is that boundary? Number 8 is add something that doesn't belong, right? Take something completely different. It could be another prompt here, another one of these catalysts, and add something to it, right? So if we're thinking about a dog, what could we do to add to that dog that doesn't belong? Might it be turning it into some sort of cyborg, giving it robotic capabilities? Or might it be putting satellite dishes or pizza pies for eyes? What could we do that just completely makes this thing completely strange and does not belong? We take that dog, we put it in outer space. We take that dog, put it underwater, right? How does that dog breathe? Maybe does it need some sort of dome over its head, or maybe it's some sort of dog fish, right? And we've got scales that still have fur. We go on from here. Number 9 is work as if subtlety is forbidden. So I remember I once had a painting teacher who said, like, screw being subtle and be obvious. Tell me what you really think. Make a painting be explicit. Because often you hear from artists, especially younger artists, who will say, I want to leave the interpretation up to the viewer. It could be anything. And, maybe, but that's often a big cop-out for not making a real solid creative choice. So if you're explicit and you want to, tell me what you really think. Let's really communicate and see how close you can get to what it is you really want to say. You might realize how difficult that is, and that's why often artists find that idea, it's really anything. The viewer can make up their mind what the story's about or what the painting's about. Is a bit of a cop-out, because often saying exactly, precisely what you want is really, really difficult. And number 10 here is make it worse before making it better. All right, so the idea, again, we go back to this dog. I give myself permission to deliberately make as bad a painting of a dog as possible, and then I'm going to try to maybe rescue it, or maybe as I work on it I realize, wow, I've got something here. An example I always give is Mickey Mouse, right? Mickey Mouse does not look like any mouse I have ever seen. And if you've ever had mice in your house, they're not nearly as adorable as Mickey and Minnie Mouse, right? So we can talk about how Walt Disney was a complete failure because how terribly he drew that mouse. Or we could think, wow, yeah, it doesn't really look like a mouse at all, but it doesn't really matter. Like, he's made trillions of dollars off this terrible drawing of a mouse, right? So sometimes what might look like a terrible drawing is an opportunity if you can turn your point of view around here. So we're going to continue here in a second, but I just want to look through some of these ideas, comments in the chat there. Skrishart says, wait, I'm back. If I am a 0 level in drawing, which book would you prefer I read and learn drawing? I have no teacher, and also I did not understand English. This sentence is being translated by Google. Good question. Well, I mean, I did a whole drawing series here on YouTube that has millions of views, so you could watch that, and I'm sure there's the auto-translate that you could watch or read that translates my presentation into virtually every language. So that, I would say, probably is a good place to start. In terms of books, beginners' books, there's lots of them out there, and I don't think there's any bad choice. Again, it's sort of like what we're talking about right now. It doesn't really matter where you start. It just matters that you start, right? That's the thing. Often artists themselves will give themselves lots of excuses why not to start. Everything needs to be perfect. I gotta wait for the perfect inspiration to hit. It's just like, just do it. Just make a decision and move forward. And then you can always change your mind later on, but you gotta start. Tatiana says, Brian Eno is my favorite too, but I have to mention that the folder is empty. Oh, maybe I forgot to put it in there. I'll do that after the episode there. But yes, it has the PDF has all the stuff we're about to mention, so you can print it out at home later on here. Ari says, this is really interesting. Lots of hearts there. Sinking Purple Ocean says, hi, awesome. Wow, look at, hey, Mesna. Is that how you say it? Hey, Mesne? Awesome, cool. Okay, let me continue here. And again, if you've got ideas, put them in the chat, and I'll incorporate them into this conversation. So the next possible thing here is giving up control, right? So different ways that we could give up control in the creative process to help get an idea off the ground. So number 11 here is let chance decide your next move. That's basically a lot of what the surrealists were doing in the 1920s and 30s, 40s, is using chance operations. You could do things with rolling dice, putting a blindfold on, put words into a hat and pick one out. I mean, there's dozens of things. There's things online where you can use to generate words automatically, random word generators, stuff like that. So you could use that as a way. You could type something into Google, like type your favorite dog in there and just see what kind of the autofill creates as a way to get an idea going. Stop correcting, only add. One of the things sometimes I do in drawing classes is forbid people from using erasers, right? You make a mistake, instead of just being like, oh, I gotta fix this and make it perfect. It's like, okay, the mistake is there, right? Make it work. Figure out some way that you can add to it. That's basically how watercolor painting is. Watercolor is a purely additive process. So if you make a mistake with watercolor, you gotta find a way to incorporate that splash, blob, line that's in the wrong place and transform it into something new. Number 13 is work faster than you think. That's one of the reasons I, especially in the drawing course, you might have seen I used a timer. Sometimes use a timer when I deliberately know that's not going to be enough time to accomplish the task. Just to accelerate, get things going. Sometimes to deliberately cause myself to make a mistake so that I've got to create some sort of solution to it and to challenge myself. The opposite of that would be to slow down to an uncomfortable degree. So sometimes when you're drawing a line, we have kind of maybe a speed that feels comfortable. What if we were to go the opposite and go as slow as possible? And maybe you do the whole drawing that way, but maybe even just a couple of seconds like that introduces a totally different mindset, an approach, where we might just go really slowly, see if we can do that whole drawing with just one continuous line. Number 15 there is let someone else make decisions for you, right? So this is very easy to do, is you maybe call up a friend or you have them by text message and you say to them, you give them maybe two options. Like you just say, they could be there in the same room with you, and you could say, like, which one do you like better? Which direction do you think I should go in? And that friend will be like, I don't know, what do you think? It's like, no, I'm asking you because I need help. Just give me a random thing. Or you say to them, pick a number between 1 and 10. Or I've got two choices behind my back, A and B. What do you think, A or B? And they go, I don't know, B. And you're like, great, B. Oh, that's what I'm going to do next, right? So sometimes asking somebody else to make decisions for you can be really liberating. Now that person might say, I think B, and you go like, yeah, I'm actually going to do A, right? You don't have to listen to that feedback. It's just some sort of catalyst that gets things going. Similar to that might be ignore your first instinct, right? Your instinct is to make this painting of your favorite dog and to paint it realistically. Okay, if that's your first instinct, okay, let's do the opposite. What is the opposite of realistically? Maybe it's super abstract, splashy, and drips, right? On the other hand is follow your first instinct completely, right? You've got this idea, and you're just like, I want to paint this dog realistically. Well, should I do that? Maybe I should. It's like, nope, follow it. Let's just do it. Boom. Let's do it. Let's not question it. Let's do it. Number 18 is work from memory only or continue without looking at a reference. So maybe you're like, I want to do this painting of a dog and I want to do it realistically, right? Maybe you look at that, you look at that photograph of your dog and then you're like, okay, I'm going to put it away. And now I'm just going to try to paint as much as possible from memory and see what I get. And yeah, does that mean it's going to be perfect? No, probably not. In fact, if it is, that would be really weird and creepy and strange and surprising, which could be good. But if you're trying to do it totally from memory, all sorts of weird things are going to get introduced. It sort of becomes like one of those police sketches, right? And there's been also, I remember reading a essay years ago about the accuracy of some of those portraits, and sometimes it's super surprising what people remember, and then also how kind of sometimes surprising it is how little we remember about maybe our own faces or our loved ones, our pet. By like when you're actually asked to describe it, you're like, oh my goodness, what color is my dog? And I've never really thought about it, right? And then so you might try to paint it, then you see them side by side, and you're like, whoa, that's so different. Or, wow, I actually got that pretty good. I'm surprised myself. Right? Whatever it takes to get things off the ground and get started. Number 19 is paint with your non-dominant hand, right? So if you're left-handed, do this painting with your right-handed. You're right-handed, use your left hand. You're ambidextrous, paint with your foot, paint with your mouth. Right? There's all sorts of people who've been in terrible accidents who actually began painting after they've lost a limb or, all of the limbs, right? So just because you have some sort of physical impairment doesn't mean that you have to stop being creative. I think that's one of the most inspiring things of all, is seeing people who have some kind of physical challenge push beyond that and find a way to express themselves creatively. I think that just is absolutely stunning. And while it's on the top of my head, there's a great movie, sort of, I mean, it's not about art, but it's about wheelchair basketball. I think it's called Murder Ball. Awesome. It's about follows a few people who've become paralyzed, who take up wheelchair basketball and become, I think one of them ends up joining the Olympic team. I mean, it's super, super inspiring about not giving up. And number 20 is set a timer and obey it strictly. So I've talked about how, I'm working on a graphic novel, comic book, and especially when I was getting it started, and I got like, oh man, I got 180 pages here. Literally what I would do is I would set like a 15-minute timer, and I would just try to draw as much as possible on the page, try to complete a page. When that timer went off, okay, let's go to the next page. Let's just start drawing, start getting ideas on the page. 15 minutes, boom. And after, a week of doing this kind of thing, I had all of those pages sketched out, and then I went back to the beginning. And I would go, okay, here's 15 minutes for each panel, and let's do as much as possible. And then it's like, so you start drawing, you're like, this is kind of awkward, 14 minutes, 50 seconds. Okay, let's just move on to the next panel. Let's see how much I can get done in 15 minutes. And then once you get all the way through the book, then going back to the beginning, and then maybe giving more time to see how we can develop that. And some of those panels, they're perfect. Some of them are terrible and have to be redone. But at least I end up getting all the way through the book, as opposed to just getting stuck at the first chapter. Okay, let's go to the next one. Grishart says, thanks, I'll follow your drawing playlist. Awesome. Snow Knight says, hello sir, how's your day going? Very good, thank you very much. I appreciate the question. Shriek Shark says, your YouTube have a new future all community post you can enable so your subscribers can all post their image. If you approve, then images are uploaded in your channel community posts, so please open it. That must be new. I haven't heard of that. I've been using Facebook. That was something that just came out of a conversation here in these classes, that people wanted to set up a Facebook, so I set up the Facebook. I mean, beyond using it for these classes, I don't actually use Facebook. YouTube is the only social media I actually end up using. So if there is a way to do it purely through YouTube, that would be interesting. I'll look into that. Thank you for the tip. That's cool. Barbara there. Hi, Barbara. Hello. I loved the timed sketches in your drawing class. Thank you. Yeah, anything to kind of just move forward. Because if you tell yourself, I've only got 10 minutes to work on this drawing, then you're also giving up the focus on perfection, because you're like, there's no way I can make this perfect in 10 minutes, so let's just do the best we can. Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's sort of give up that control that often paralyzes artists. Snow Knight says, drawing on paper and drawing on digital notebooks, it's really completely different. Hard to switch from old to computer stuff. Yeah, drawing, I mean, I draw on a tablet. I've got a few different iPads here. I actually really like the iPad mini, because I can put it in a big jacket pocket or carry it around with me, as opposed to my big 12-inch iPad here. But I draw on my iPad every day. And I also draw on paper all the time too. Yeah, they're different, but so is apples and oranges, but they're all delicious, right? It's just about the more and more you use these different tools, the less of a kind of transition it feels, and the more transferable those skills become. Lionel says, good evening, Mr. Markowski. Lionel from Zambia. That's so cool. I'm enjoying your lessons, learning how to draw hair and absorbing a lesson or two daily since the 23rd of March. As usual, thank you. That is so cool. Yes. I mean, that's great. If you can make making art, drawing, painting, singing, dancing, whatever it is, a daily activity, a habit, a routine, then the kind of growth that you're going to see is going to be massive, as opposed to someone doing it once a week or once a month or once a year, right? It's just like anything else. If you want to lose weight, right, and you go for a jog once a year, probably not going to see much results. But if you're working on that, you know, every day, every 2 days or whatever it is, you're going to start seeing a increase in muscle mass and all sorts of other kinds of things. Sinking Purple Ocean says, I'm following your drawing classes and learning a lot, sir. I find it so hard to draw noses from different angles. Absolutely. Noses are maybe the weirdest, most difficult part of the human body to draw. Ears are a close second, right? But yeah, drawing noses is really tricky. But that's also where, you know, a lot of artists' styles reside in the nose. Once you start looking at different artists, just look at the way they draw noses, and you'll notice every artist does them just a little bit differently, has their own unique way of doing it. And as I've probably said before, like, look at Rembrandt, maybe the greatest Dutch artist of all time. Every time he drew lots of his own self-portraits, painted lots of his own self-portraits too, and pretty much every time he painted and drew somebody else, he took his own nose and just put it right on them, right? I mean, that's sort of kind of the little bit of the joke, is that artists kind of project themselves onto the people that they depict. So often artists find one way of doing it and then they just copy and paste it everywhere else. Shishark says, I am from India. Wow, people on the other side of the planet. We got Zambia and India and England here. Angel says, hi Michael and everyone. I painted 2 paintings with you and they came out pretty bad. I'm a first-time painter and I didn't gesso the canvas. Also, the paints I had weren't the best. Hey, that's okay. I say just keep on going. I think it's really important when you're just starting out not to judge yourself, or not to judge yourself too harshly, at least. Just remember, you got to start somewhere. You know, I've got a 6-year-old daughter here, and I remember her walking for the first time. It took lots of practice, lots of falls, some tears, but now she's running around, climbing on everything, right? Most of us don't remember how difficult some of those first steps that we took in life actually were. There's a reason why we don't remember much before the age of 6, because our brain just says, you don't want to remember that, or it's, man, there was so much, you know, struggle in those first few years, right? So don't worry so much about the quality. Focus on quantity, absorbing as much as possible, trying to create as much as possible, and the quality will come. Okay, Angel. Oh, Barbara says, I do little paintings and drawings for practice and for fun. I keep them and sometimes turn them into birthday cards. I love that. Yeah, I mean, again, just because you make something doesn't mean you have to show it to anybody, right? You can do a drawing and you could tear it up or draw. I would suggest is to keep it and then doodle and draw over top of it. Put a mustache or sunglasses on that portrait you don't like. Have some fun with it. You're going to throw it away anyway. It can't get worse, right? So but it's also, you might take parts of an artwork and recycle it and transform it into something else. Maybe like what Barbara's saying, maybe you start out, you're going to make a big painting, and you're painted some birds, but you don't like the way the sky looks. You're just like, you know what? I'm just going to cut this bird out. I'm going to put that on a birthday card, right? Instead of throwing the whole thing away, right? There might be there probably is really good parts of it that can be reused. Angel says, I have depression and no money, so easier, least amount of steps, the better. Well, you know what? Depression is something pretty much every artist struggles with, so you're in good company. That's something I've talked about openly before, about dealing with anxiety and depression. I have a therapist, I got medication, and I'm a strong believer in both of those. If you disagree, that's fine. We can still get along. But I'm a strong believer in treating the brain just like any other part of the body, whether that's like your heart or your leg. If there's something wrong with your leg, you would go to the doctor. If there's something wrong with your brain, you go to the doctor, right? But I do think making art is a great way of helping to deal with anxiety and depression. It's literally how art therapy as a industry has grown exponentially over the past few decades, is because literally various militaries around the world, the Canadian, U.S. Army, use art as a therapeutic device to help soldiers overcome PTSD, injuries that they might have endured. Okay, I'm going to move on. Here, okay, there's so many comments. You know what? How about let's go to the next set, and I'll come back here, because otherwise I'll get stuck. So, another series of prompts is to reframe that image, right? So take what you've got and try to reframe it, see it in a different way. So number 21 here is to crop aggressively, right? So if we're doing a drawing of a dog, right? One way is to be like, what if I just zoomed as close into its eye as possible and made a painting of just the dog's eye, or just the dog's tail, or I zoom in so close it's just some hairs of the dog, right? And maybe it zooms in so close it's the mites on the dog, right? Or the dog's nose, or its saliva, or its tongue. If we keep zooming in, you're going to start seeing different worlds you had no idea existed. Maybe sometimes you don't even want to know exists, right? So zoom into a fragment and expand it. That's kind of the same sort of thing, is, just taking something, expanding it, and distorting that image potentially. Number 23 is imagine the scene at night. So if we take something familiar, but we completely invert the time of day that it takes place in, that can totally transform that image. So taking that painting of your dog, or the photograph of the dog you want to work from, let's say, what would it look like if that dog was, instead of sitting on your couch at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but it was sitting in a field at 2:30 in the morning? Would that look like the dog is at peace and in its happy place out in the wild? Or would it look like the dog is terrified to be outside alone by itself, right? I mean, all sorts of ways that this can go from just that little bit of a catalyst. Translate everything into 2 values only. So values is how we measure the contrast between light and dark, right? So if we were to take an image and translate it into just 2 values, let's say black and white, or different levels of gray, black and a light gray, or white and a dark gray, or whatever that might be. Or again, we could do, let's say, a dark red and a light blue, or a light bright yellow and a really muted purple, right? Really big contrasts there are a great way to get something started. Generally, it's going to result in something that's kind of almost abstract, but that can be at the very least a great way to get something going. And it's often the way that artists begin a painting anyway. It's sort of like what we might call the underpainting, or at least what some artists might call an underpainting. Number 25 is turn the image into pure shape. So instead of trying to see that dog as a dog, what if we break that the dog into shapes, triangles, circles, squares, rectangles, polygons, whatever it is to translate it into something else. In that translation process, maybe it no longer becomes a dog at all, and it just becomes a bunch of different abstract shapes, like a Vasily Kandinsky painting, right? Where it just becomes, everything's atomized and just colors and shapes. And you can title that artwork Dog Number 1 if you want, or you could just title it Untitled Number 74, right? Does it matter at the end of the day that it began as a photograph of a dog? Maybe that's important to you. Or maybe you're just like, I'm not even going to tell anybody where I got this idea. Yeah, I always meant to paint this abstract painting, right? It's up to you to decide how you want to present that work. Treat it as a map, not a picture, right? So imagine if we took a picture of a dog and then we decide to treat that picture as a map rather than a photograph of a dog. So we just basically remove all of the detail. Let's say we just look at the outer shape of that dog and turn it into like an island, right? I mean, people do that with actual islands anyway. People talk about how the country of Italy looks like a boot, right? So what if we do the opposite way? We make a country that looks like a boot. We start with a boot and transform it into a country. Or we take the outline, silhouette of a dog, transform that into some sort of landscape. Maybe the nose becomes the tallest point it's a giant mountain, or it's a really deep valley. We go in the negative, in the opposite, and it's this giant hole like the Grand Canyon. What would the Grand Canyon look like if it was shaped like a dog, right? That's some of those kinds of things we can see in the work of like Salvador Dali, taking images and transforming them into landscapes. Slightly different than a map, but you can see how, I mean, it doesn't have to always stay as a map. You could try to extrude it into some sort of three-dimensional form. Number 27 is stretch the proportions beyond realism. So we take that dog and then we start pulling and twisting and scrunching and exaggerating, minimizing different parts of it. So maybe we take the ears and we just keep on pulling them out. They get so big they flop down and they turn into big spirals. We take the nose and we pinch it outward, or we flatten it. We make the bulb of the nose tiny, or we widen it so it takes up the whole face and we just have two little eyes poking up out top, right? So we just start playing with those proportions. That's what cartoonists, satirists do all the time when they're making drawings of a president or some political figure, is they start playing with the proportions and often make the head really big so the body is really small. By doing that, you infantilize somebody in power, which is why artists have been doing that for centuries, because you can get it when you make a king look like a little child with this giant bobblehead, right? It makes them look silly. It takes away their power, right? So that's a very common way that artists have ridiculed people in positions of power. Number 28 is flatten all depth. So take that three-dimensional image and flatten it right down, right? And then sometimes that transforms that image into something quite abstract and strange and weird. It becomes like a stamp or like a silhouette, right? And then once it's a silhouette, then we can start pulling it and twisting and doing all sorts of weird things to it, and maybe it no longer becomes a dog at all. Or how could we make an image of a dog that is totally flat? I mean, that's kind of like the concept behind cubism, is this idea of can we see a box? You know, if we've got a box, what have I got a box around here? Let's try to find something. Well, if we have a cardboard box, we can only ever really see it from three sides at one time, maybe the top and two sides. But if we're looking at the top, we can't see the bottom. So cubism is like taking that box, turning it to, let's say, cardboard, unfolding it and flattening it on the table so we could see all 6 sides at once. Could we do that with a dog? Right? Can we see all sides of that dog at once? Could we unfold it like a piece of cardboard, lay it down onto the table, right? So we can see all angles simultaneously. Maybe the opposite would be is to exaggerate the perspective. So instead of flattening it, make the space super dynamic. So exaggerating perspective is like a technique called foreshortening, where we might, instead of, so, you know, when I reach my hand towards the camera, my hand now seems much bigger than it might normally, quote, be, right? But by doing a drawing like that, I really create something way more dynamic. And we can really start to, you know, think of like we can distort the image just like the fisheye lens on a camera, right? All of a sudden we have maybe the nose becomes really big, the ears get really small, right? So we can play with that. We can show kind of really dynamic points of view using geometric perspective. I did a couple classes on that. This is a little bit more advanced than that, but think about if you look at a comic book and you see Spider-Man swinging through the streets of Manhattan, right? Sometimes we see these dynamic perspectives looking down, and the people on the street are just tiny little dots, but we see the windows of the skyscrapers right next to that person. Number 30 is to remove the horizon or eye line from a picture. You know, most pictures are taken with a camera kind of around this angle looking straight forward, right? If you just take your camera and turn it down, or so that we don't see the horizon, where the sky meets the ground, all of a sudden the picture is going to be kind of a little bit very different. Or if we do the opposite, we flip it up so we don't see the ground at all, we're just looking at trees and clouds, it becomes a very, very dynamic image. So if we go back to the idea of making a picture of a dog, if we take we want to make a picture of a dog that has no horizon behind them, then what does it mean if that dog appears to be floating through the air like a superhero, or we're looking down on top of that dog, maybe digging a hole, right? So how can we play with perspective? Oh wow, okay, tons of comments. Shark says, but sir, if we are not comparing our works and not judging them, then how do we improve? Wow, great question. Okay, great question. That's a sip of tea question. Okay, so you're responding to that idea of not judging yourself, not being too critical when you're just getting started, but then you're saying, but then how do I improve if I'm not judging and noticing where my mistakes are? Well, there's a difference between being observant and being aware and being objective and looking at a drawing and being like, oh, I think those that the eyes of, I did this drawing of a dog, but the eyes are too close together. Okay, we'll do another one. As opposed to being like, oh man, I'm such an idiot. The eyes are too close. How stupid am I? I can't do anything right. Oh, why did I even tell myself I could make art? That's a really negative mindset that is not going to lead to anything productive, versus looking at that drawing and trying to see maybe what works, but also see the potential that that mistake could cause. Because you might look at that drawing of a dog and be like, those eyes are too close. What if I make them even closer? What if I turn this into a dog with only one eye? I just merge those two eyes into one. I make a cyclops dog. A cyclob. A dog clops. Right? Whatever that might be, you start kind of merging that together. See if there's our potential. Could I make a dog that only has one gigantic eye? Or what if instead of just two close eyes. I put another eye on the other side, and I turn it into like a giant bug's eye. I've got dozens of eyes there. I keep adding eyes, and they keep multiplying, right? Then all of a sudden that drawing just starts becoming weirder and stranger. And yeah, maybe you're like, oh, I'm not going to show this to anybody. They're going to think I'm crazy. Or you turn and be like, whoa, I've just created something really weird. I bet you if I put this online, somebody's going to say, like, that's cool. Make a t-shirt out of that, right? So just being, I think, gentle with yourself, at least at first. I mean, I really think you should be gentle with yourself at all times. You know, one of the things that I often think about is, like, I have a photograph of my daughter that I always have nearby, and I got another big picture of her up there by the TV. And so if those voices in my head start telling me that I'm bad and I'm doing it wrong, I just look at her and I imagine, would I ever talk like that to my own daughter? Would I ever say to her, oh, this is a terrible drawing. Oh, what is wrong with you? Right? I would never say anything like that. I mean, that would be terrible parenting. I'd be a horrible human being for that. But somehow we allow ourselves to say things like that to our own selves. That's cruel, right? So that's why I have those images around, so that I remind myself to be gentle with myself. And if I look at that drawing, and if, let's say, my daughter did it and the two eyes on the dog were too close together, I'd say, wow, that's a really interesting dog. Huh. Why did you decide to do it that way? And then she might say, oh, it's because the dog is looking at a butterfly on its nose. I just haven't drawn it yet. And so its eyes are kind of, I'll be like, oh, wow. Right? So then I can learn, maybe she forgot to draw the butterfly and that's why it looks so. There could be all sorts of different reasons, but it's by taking that more positive approach, it's a great way of moving forward, not getting stalled out on problems, and transforming it into potential for something else. Okay. Angel says, thank you. I drew a birthday card for my mom by learning from your drawing classes. She loved it and hung it up, and I'm 46 years old. That's awesome. Never too late. That's great. I'm so proud of you. She hung it in her kitchen. That is so cool, right? And so that also starts to transform not only the way that other people see you, but the way you start seeing yourself. Because if you start sharing your art with other people, they're like, wow, I didn't know you could draw. That's so cool. Thank you very much. And then you say to yourself, huh, people are looking at me a little bit differently as a little bit more creative person. Maybe I am a little bit more of a creative person than I've given myself credit for, right? And then not only that, but it also encourages that other person is like, you know what, my friend gave me this birthday card and she painted it all by herself. Maybe I should take a drawing class. Maybe I should dust out that violin that's been in the closet for 20 years, and I used to be really good at guitar. Or tap dancing. Let's get back into that. I've always wanted to do that. Right? So it's infectious. Art is infectious. Once you spread this positive energy amongst your community, super, super positive. Sir, have you written any books on drawing for beginners? I have not. Although I will say, you know, of all transparency, kind of everything that I've been doing on this channel for the past 6 years is sort of me putting my thoughts together to eventually do something like that. So everything that I'm doing is kind of similar to what I'm talking about. Is like, instead of just sitting there and like, I got to get all my ideas perfect before I put it into the world. It's like, put it into the world. Let other people like you guys give me feedback, help me make this better. Therefore, when I actually do put it together, it is like, it's been tested, it's battle tested, ready to go. People have been using it. It works, right? And if I hadn't done that, I would still be like, oh yeah, one day. But here, it's all the train has left the station, right? Snow Knight says, number 2, before we can even start, we got so scared and we run away. Yeah, absolutely. That happens to lots of people. Artists themselves often get, they look at that blank piece of paper and just like, oh, I don't know. It'd be so much easier to do a lot of other things. You know what? I could just clean the bathroom or wash some dishes, all of which are important stuff. But sometimes you end up doing that stuff to the exclusion, knowing that it's easier to do that than to start something new, right? So that often people do run away. Moonit says, hi, I'm a design student and your drawing courses helped me a lot. Thank you. That is very cool. I love it. I love that you're doing design, and some of the things that we were talking about in class have helped you with your design work as a student and later in life. That makes me really excited. I'd love to see some of the stuff you've created. Join our Facebook group. Share us. Put your website link there. I'd love to see it. And Shark says, I'm 17 years old. I am a person who draws for hobby, and in the future, I'm definitely going to become a doctor. That's great. Even the creativity that you learn and exhibit in drawing, those skills can be used for being a doctor as well. Because as a doctor, there's going to be lots of different times where you see things maybe that you've never seen before. And you have to use your creativity to try to understand and figure out if what you're seeing is what you've read about or if it's something completely new. So creativity is really important no matter what it is you do in life. That's why I think, artists often talk about the importance of art education in schools. People focus a lot on science and STEM. We talk about STEAM, incorporating art into the STEM, because art can be really, really powerful, maybe even more powerful than all those others combined, to helping give people self-confidence and the courage to do things beyond what they believe they are originally capable of doing. So let's move on to material experiments here. So number 31 is to use a tool not meant for painting or for drawing or for playing violin. Can you play violin with a cucumber? I don't know, but I'd sure find it fascinating to see if somebody could make it work. And I bet you somebody's already done something like that, right? But the idea of just taking your tools and instead of reaching for the most obvious one that you always reach for, is look for something completely different, right? Go into your kitchen and see, is there anything in my kitchen I could use to make a painting, right? Well, maybe it's the what do they call, the turkey baster, right? You suck up a bunch of paint and you squeeze that paint onto a canvas, right? I mean, there's all sorts of different kinds of things that you could use. I teach idea generation at Emily Carr University of Art here in Vancouver, and one of the projects I make students do is make artwork using food. So they like go home, look what's in your fridge, or when you go for lunch, take some of that food and try and make a drawing out of your chicken McNuggets and French fries, or the rice, or pho noodles, or whatever it is. Make something, do something with it. Play with your food. Don't listen to your mom for 5 minutes, right? So like, even think about this idea of, I'm talking about my dog, right? A dog that I want to create a picture of. I don't have a dog right now. I did when I was a kid, but let's say we take this, our favorite dog, and we try to make a picture of a dog with food. Well, the next kind of question would be like, well, what kind of food should I use? Should I use dog food? Or should I use food that might be poisonous to a dog? Maybe I make it out of chocolate, because dogs aren't supposed to eat chocolate, right? Or, I use ketchup, mustard, right? What are, it can go on endlessly as to how you might create it. You make piece of toast and try to burn a dog's image on there, or you cut the shape of the toast out, make, you know, Christmas cookies, make your own stencil or stamp. Number 32 is limit yourself to one brush or one tool. So if you typically make a painting with 5 different brushes, challenge yourself to just use one brush. Maybe it's the biggest brush you have or the smallest brush you have. How would you paint a big painting with one little brush? Do you do the whole thing with one tiny little brush? Or then do you get like so impatient you just chuck a bunch of paint onto the painting, then you use that little brush or the back side of the brush to scrape into that paint? You know, it doesn't even just have to be a brush. What if it's a pencil? It's like, okay, I'm going to do this drawing with one tool. Instead of using a pencil, I'm just going to use an eraser. Okay, so how do we make a drawing with just an eraser? Do we erase and use the eraser shavings? Or maybe we start the painting, put a bunch of charcoal or graphite on there, and try to erase the image with just an eraser. Or use your fingers. Number 33 is work with a nearly dry brush only. Right, so dry brush is a technique invented in China like 5,000 years ago, and it's really tricky. It's to literally get a little bit of pigment color on a brush and maybe literally wipe that off and paint with a brush that is almost dry. It creates a very different kind of look where we start seeing maybe the bristles of the brush or leaving or kind of creating broken, separated lines. Some people love that look, and it can be really fun to be forced to experiment with a dry brush. And again, that doesn't have to necessarily be just with paint, right? If we think about could we use the same approach thinking about like a pencil or a pen. You know, let's say you've got a bunch of old markers that you've been meaning to throw out, and maybe they're in your garbage right now, is to go and grab those markers. Can I make a reasonable drawing of, again, go back to the example of my dog, using a bunch of markers I was going to throw out? Well, maybe if you're going to throw them out, then what could maybe we cut them open and we take out the ink that's inside and try to do something with that. Yeah, maybe it turns into a gigantic mess and you're like, I'm never doing that again, right? But maybe but you create this weird image and then you just cut it up and turn it into little tiles or puzzle pieces that you use to transform something else with it. Number 34 is flood the surface, embrace liquidity, right? So that's like taking paint and just splashing it over top of the surface. Again, that's another technique that it comes from Asia and China and Japan. There's whole methods of painting that involve taking ink and just splashing it onto the surface and then trying to create a composition from those random splashes. It's kind of like reading tea leaves. It's like you look at it and think, what have I done here? Does that look like a mountain or a lake or a giant koi fish? How could I transform that into something? Yeah, it gets messy, but sometimes, especially if you've run into a block, sometimes getting messy is what you really need. 35 is using only transparent layers. Some people love painting with transparencies, like glazing techniques. Some people hate it. Well, if you hate it, maybe it's the time to do it, right? To give yourself a different direction, experiment for a little while. On the opposite is using only opaque marks, right? If you're someone who's always drawing really lightly, you're always afraid to push too hard, it's like take an 8B pencil out of your pencil case, draw and make the darkest marks possible. Just grind that pencil into the surface so much that you're tearing into the paper, right? Yeah, sometimes you might be like, oh, this is terrible, right? But on the other hand, you might be like, that was kind of fun. That was kind of cathartic. What if I do a bunch of these? I never have to show them to people, but it could just be for me to kind of get some energy out onto the page. 37 is paint on an unusual surface. So I've done lots of paintings like that onto unusual surfaces. I did for 3 straight years. I painted on Canadian Army helmets as a part of a fundraiser for veterans who'd been injured in combat, and trying to make a painting on a helmet is pretty tricky. I mean, you've probably seen, you know, that same sort of thing. Sometimes there are a bunch of cows that artists decorate, or angels, or birds, or whatever, and you'll see 50 different artists will try to paint them and customize them to their own style, and they'll be spread around a city. So trying to paint on an uneven surface is really tricky, but it can be a lot of fun, especially as a challenge. So you can go to you could go to a thrift shop, buy a jacket, an old jacket or a sweater, a t-shirt. Go buy a pack of new t-shirts and draw with a Sharpie on those t-shirts or paint on them. I mean, those are really difficult things. You probably want to stretch the fabric out a little bit, but that can be really wild and exciting, and feels, especially if you buy something new and then you try to paint on top of it. Like, that's one thing I like to do when it comes to my painting clothes. I used to just wear the oldest, dirtiest clothes I could find that had holes in them, and that's what I would use for my painting clothes. And then I realized, like, this is sort of my job. I don't want to just wear the worst clothes in my house to go do my job, right? Like, I want to, just like you go to a job interview, you put on your nicest sweater or your tie or dress, and that gives you confidence. You feel like you look your best. That's the way I want to feel when I'm making art. I want to be wearing something that I really like, that's comfortable. And often what I deliberately do is splatter some paint on it right off the bat, so that I'm not afraid of, oh, my favorite sweater, I got something on it. I mean, you've probably seen me get paint on my clothes in class, and so sometimes it's like, well, I guess I got painting clothes now, right? So I believe in that, absolutely. Number 38 is mix colors poorly. Accept the mud, right? So sometimes people mix colors and they're like, this is the wrong color. Ooh, that's an ugly color. Try using that ugly color in a painting. Probably the best place would be in the background, because unless you want the background to compete with the foreground, you probably want to kind of blah, boring, ugly color in the background, because that's going to make whatever's in the foreground sing and pop. Just think about like going to see a musical or a play. You know, if there's 50 people on the stage and they look better than the main star in the foreground, or a wedding, you don't want to be somebody competing with the bride. You don't want your clothes to be better than the bride's, right? So you want to kind of fade in the background to let that person take center stage. So sometimes using those muddy colors, let's be like, oh wow, this is perfect. I can put this in the background, and then anything I put in front of it is going to look great in relationship to it. Number 39 is restrict your palette aggressively. Restrict yourself to maybe 3 colors, 1 color, 2 colors. Pretty much every artist will talk about the importance of using a limited palette. In the classes that I teach, or the painting classes, I talk about using the split primary palette, which means 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues, a black, and a white. So 8 tubes of paint maximum. And with those 8 colors, we can paint any painting that's ever been made, except for some really super bright neon saturated colors. So we can use that limited palette to mix anything. But what if we were to go even more narrow? Just use, let's say a warm red and a cool blue. And those are the only colors I can use to make this entire painting. That's a major restriction, but it forces you to be creative, to kind of work your way out of that grave you've dug for yourself. But in all seriousness, a limited palette is almost always, I'd say 99.99% of the time, better than using every possible color, right? Restrictions can really, really, really help, because it helps not get overwhelmed too. Again, it's going to make everything kind of unified. Number 4 is use color straight from the tube. So instead of taking those colors, squeezing them onto a palette, and then carefully mixing them, is to take that tube of paint, squeeze the paint right onto the palette, and just start working from it directly. Right? Another way of doing this when it comes to drawing is you can get graphite powder. If you took that graphite, instead of using a pencil to apply it to the surface, take that powder, just dump it all over the surface, and then draw into it, erase into it, use your fingers to smudge into it, take water on a brush, paint in. I mean, now you've thrown it at the fan. Let's see what sticks. Okay. Angel says, Michael, I saw on Reddit an illustrator named Emily M. Madden who drew cats in adventure situations that remind me of Louis Wayne. Have you ever heard of her? I have not heard of her, but that shouldn't mean anything. It's not. That's not a mark of greatness or not, because there's plenty of things I've never heard of. But that sounds great. Yeah, I mean, animals doing unusual things, like it sounds like what Louis Wayne did. We did a painting of Louis Wayne, a cat playing guitar, I think it was. I think it was a cat playing guitar while a bunch of little birds are gathered around watching. Fun painting, but that's kind of one of the fun things we can do with this idea of you start with a spark and then you start playing with it, right? It's like, I'm going to make a painting of a cat and it's going to be playing guitar and there's going to be little birds gathered around as an audience, right? That's literally how an idea can form. It's like, well, you might be like, that's ridiculous. Well, yeah, it's ridiculous, but let's see if we can bring it into the world and see how ridiculous or how special it could be, right? There's always that opportunity that it's not so ridiculous once it appears in front of you. So don't judge an idea before it's gotten out of your head. Once it's out of your head, then you can look at it and you can make some decisions, as we'll talk about later on here, as to what to do going forward. But try to not judge yourself, especially before you've even taken that first step. Sinking in Purple says, I love still life drawing a lot, but I never thought of drawing food. I'm going to try drawing my next meal before I eat it. That would be cool. Imagine you have a sketchbook and every single page documents the food that you had, the bowl of cereal or the apple that you had as a midnight snack or the takeout container. Maybe sometimes you're so hungry you only have time to draw the food after it's been finished, right? So the empty pizza box or something, right? Because sometimes you're like, oh, I just want to eat this, I'm so hungry. I don't really have the patience to draw it. Well, draw it after you got a couple pizza crusts and some crumbs left on the plate. That can also be cool, could be funny. Maybe instead it's a bunch of drawings of food after you've eaten it. The little bit of ice cream left on the plate, right? Or on the ice cream that's stuck to your fingers. Angel says that is cool. Barbara says, number 34. Yeah, I tried that. It didn't end so well. Flood the surface, embrace liquidity. Yes. Yeah, it doesn't always have to end up great. But sometimes, you might look at this like, well, I don't want to do that. Even just knowing what you don't want to do can be really helpful information, right? Because it's like you're trying to decide where to go for food, right? And you have a friend like, where should we go for food? I don't know. Suggest something. You're like, I don't know. Why don't we go for sushi? And they're like, no, I had that for lunch. Right? Okay, so we're just going to take sushi off the list. That's helpful. That's one choice that it's not under consideration anymore. So now that limits the field. Okay. Well, how about pizza then? I got a gluten allergy. I can't eat any. And you're like, oh, okay. That narrows things even more, right? And then that can help us discover what you really do want, or maybe the only thing you can do. There's Deborah in the chat, and Richard's there with you as well. Hi, Deborah and Richard. Great to see you guys in the chat. That's great. Sinking Purple Ocean says, I'm learning gouache painting, and I use all the colorful paint left on the palette to paint colorful trees like a child. That's great. Gouache is kind of a bit of a tricky medium. Gouache kind of exists halfway between watercolor and acrylic painting. So I think if you can get gouache down, you'd find acrylic painting much easier, and you'd have a kind of a head start on learning watercolor as well. Diaries says, Goat, I'm always done with your drawing playlist after a year. I also made a 1-year art progress video crediting you. I love you, Mr. Markowski. Oh, I'm almost done with your drawing playlist after a year. That's great. That is so cool. Angels, I can't see Barbara's crumbs for some reason. That's okay. Yeah, I don't know why sometimes, who knows? Who knows technology? Why some things work and don't work. Trust me, that's the story of my life the past 6 years, dealing with technology and tech issues. But to go back to Diaries, thank you so much. That's so cool that you've been doing that playlist and you've stuck with it. You've maybe take some time off and come back, and then you take some time off, come back again. That's okay. However, it could take 10 years to do it. That's okay. As long as you're moving forward, that's a good thing. And so even sometimes you feel like you're moving backwards, if you're just thinking about art, I think that is a little baby step forward. Thank you so much for your donation there, Diaries. Let's ride chat. Angel says, did she block me? I don't know. I don't know if that's even possible to do here, but I wouldn't worry so much about it. I wouldn't worry about those kinds of things. Okay, let's continue on. So other kind of catalysts that we can use and combine with a spark are mental shifts, ways to kind of change, maybe not our tools, but the way that we approach or think about something. So number 41, there's pretend this is your last painting, right? If this is your last painting, right, what is it that you want to say in this painting? Right? If it's, again, going back to this example of a dog, it's a painting of your favorite dog. If this is going to be the last painting you ever make, maybe the universe is about to explode, right? Would that influence the way you make this painting? Would you paint that dog with extra love and care? Or would you try to paint it as quickly as possible so that you can get out into the world and watch the asteroid collide with Earth, right? How, just that idea of approaching it that way can radically change how one might approach an artwork. Another one is pretend this doesn't matter at all. Tell yourself, no one's ever going to see this. In fact, you could, as I've done projects with students, is say, I want you to do this drawing, but just know in the next 10 minutes, we're going to take them and we're going to go outside and we're going to burn them. So it can be as good or bad as you want, but in 10 minutes, it's no longer going to exist. So for some people, that is really exciting. It's like, oh, I could just go wild and silly. I could crumple it up into a ball. I can tear it because who cares? It's going to be destroyed. Some other people find that the whole idea of that terrifying. Is like, well, I'm not going to bother doing anything then. If it's going to be destroyed, what's the point? Right? So different people might have different feelings about that. But that's the idea of a prompt, a catalyst like this, is to kind of confront you with a possibility, and you, depending on your reaction to that, is what kind of stimulates the creation of an artwork. Number 43 is work as if explaining something to a beginner. So this is kind of like if you have to teach something to somebody, you've got to kind of know it, and if you don't know it, you've got to pretend like you know it, because no one wants to take a class from somebody who's like, oh gosh, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do now. I think we've all been there in maybe school, and the assistant or the substitute teacher was there, and they're like, what are you guys doing today? Ooh, I don't know, right? It's like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? This is... Right? But if you're with somebody who appears at least to be very confident about what they're doing, like me, maybe you're interested in listening to what they have to say. But doing that can also kind of give you a kind of false sense of confidence, which is what you might need to work on it. Because if you're standing in front of a class trying to paint this dog, right? And if you're but you don't really know how to paint that dog, you might paint it differently than if you were at home by yourself and not knowing how to paint it. So if you're painting it, you're like, okay, everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to take our brush and then we're going to go, whoa, blah, blah. And then people are like, oh, that's weird, mine looks terrible. And you're like, that's the way it's supposed to look. I'm a genius, just follow me. Right? And then that it kind of instills you with this kind of a different attitude as you approach it. Number 44 is kind of same. I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but work as if no one will ever see it, right? So just imagine that you're going to hide it, and maybe it won't ever be seen, or maybe it'll be seen after you've died. There's kind of a famous example in art history of Marcel Duchamp, a piece called Étant donné, which I don't think anybody really knew existed until after he died. And essentially what it consisted of is this giant diorama, well, like room-sized diorama, that could only be seen through a little hole in the wall. And it was of this woman laying in this kind of field, and there was kind of this big barn door, and so that after he died, that artwork was, well, actually I think it was moved before he died, I think, but I have to remember, I don't know the exact context off the top of my head. I once knew, but it's on display anyway at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, or is the Philadelphia Art Museum? I know they just had this big thing of changing the name and changing it back, and so I'm confused now, but essentially in Philadelphia, if you go up the top of those stairs and walk right by the Rocky statue, Sylvester Stallone there from Rocky on the top of the steps there, and go actually into the museum, and if you look around, you'll see it kind of hiding around the corner. So it's this idea of making something, maybe no one knows that you made it until after you died. I teach a photography class, and just yesterday we were talking about this photographer Vivian Maier. There's a great documentary. It was a finalist for the Academy Award, and came out in 2013, called Finding Vivian Maier. It's on Netflix right now. You can watch it. It's about this woman who, after she died, her family went into her apartment to clean it out and realized there were boxes and upon boxes of undeveloped rolls of film. They started developing them, only to realize that she was one of the greatest photographers of all time. But she just didn't care about sharing her work with anybody. She just really liked making photographs and taking photographs. So that could be you as well. You make artwork, but you have no intention of showing it to people. And you could say to your friend, just like Franz Kafka did, after I'm dead, burn everything I did. And thank goodness Franz Kafka's friend did not burn everything he did, and we have the great writings that he created. But, right, there's examples of artists burning all of their older work because they want a fresh start. So those are also opportunities. Number 45 is imagine you're collaborating with someone absent, right? So it's like playing like chess with somebody over the phone or over the internet. But just imagine that instead of there actually being somebody there, it's you. So maybe each time you turn the chessboard and you do the next move, then you turn it around, and then you're sort of playing chess with somebody else. When I am making artwork, I often see the artwork having a dialogue with the drawing or painting itself. And this gets to a little bit later on, but it's like I'm sitting there sort of like, it might sound crazy, but you'll hear artists talk about this, is I ask the artwork to tell me what it wants. right? And I look at it and I say to it like, well, what do you think? What do you think? Should I put a line here? And sometimes it's just, I sort of allow that kind of silly part of my mind to be like, no, 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 don't put a line there. No. So I'm like, okay, I won't put the line there. Where else should it be? Well, how about if it was at the bottom? I think a line would look good. Okay, yes, it's okay. I'll put a line there. Oh, I'm glad that we can agree on where that line goes. I know it sounds silly, but sometimes being a little bit silly while you're making artwork can be so liberating. It doesn't have to be so serious. You can tell people later on how serious your artwork is, but when you're making it, you can be as silly as you want. Other options here, number 46, would be to think of it as a study, not a final work, right? So you just give yourself permission. It's just like, I'm just learning here. I'm not making this to sell or exhibit. I'm not going to take a photo and put it online. I'm just practicing, just playing, testing out some ideas. And you know what? It might turn into something great. And you're like, whoa, this is better than anything I've ever done. And then you think to yourself, interesting. That the moment I told myself this wasn't important is when I made my best stuff. Huh. Maybe I'm putting too much pressure on myself, and maybe I just need to let go a little bit, right? So that observation as to what's going on can also really be really important. On the other hand, think of it as a final and not a study, right? So you might start an artwork and say, oh, this is just for fun, but then you might say to yourself, nope, this is actually, I'm going to transform this into a masterpiece. I mean, that's a bit more of a challenge for maybe a bit more advanced artist, but trying to think about like, how could I rescue or transform this little fun experiment into something really serious, really important. That's a huge challenge. Definitely not something for a beginner, but if you're at that point where you're looking for a challenge, that can be a really good one. Again, very, very difficult one, but can be that's like getting close to the tip of Everest kind of challenge. Number 40 is approach it like a problem to solve. I mean, I think about that with creativity in general, is like, okay, here's my painting of a dog. How do I get this on the page, right? And just start thinking of it like a math problem. What are my options? What are the possibilities? What is this dog before you even get started? What is it made of? What are its textures? Start breaking it down into kind of to find the direction you might go forward from there. Because I think all creativity is problem solving, and that's one of the things that I love about making art. Is it's like playing a video game, or it's like playing a crossword puzzle or something. It's like, I don't need to do this to myself, but the challenge of trying to resolve an idea is what's really exciting. So I'm giving myself a problem in order to try to solve it, with the idea that if I can solve it, then I can have a breakthrough and potentially solve other really complex problems. Number 49 is approach it like a story to tell. Right? So if I go back to my example of a dog, right? What is the story I want to tell about my dog? About my favorite dog? And how do I communicate that to somebody? Is it just making a really pretty picture of that dog? Is that going to communicate the love I have for that dog? Maybe it's a story about sadness. That dog has passed away and I want it to make it really nostalgic. So how could I bring that nostalgia out? Maybe do I want to include other elements, things, buildings, toys, places, people in that image to accentuate some of those feelings? Right? So what is the story that I want to tell about this painting? What do I want the viewer to think or feel upon observing it and experiencing that artwork? So kind of working our way backward from what the viewer experiences can help you kind of figure out the direction you want to go. All right, I mean, that's kind of like Hollywood movies are a lot like that, right? You might have a story about I don't know. It's one of the things I found in that book was something about a Western, right? So let's say a Western. It's a story of a mysterious person who comes to town. Are they a good guy or are they a bad guy? What's their story? I mean, there's a lot of Westerns are like that, right? The stranger who arrives into town. A lot of Clint Eastwood movies kind of begin that way, right? There's a silhouette of this figure with their kind of, not cape, but poncho blowing in the wind, and the dust bunnies rolling through town, right? But then it's to think about, like, well, what are the different ways I could tell this story? Could I tell it as a comedy? Could I tell it as a drama, as a romance? Does it have to be a Western? Could it be a horror movie? Or could it be a mockumentary? I mean, all of a sudden the options start growing here, right? Going back, maybe it's a Western about my dog, right? What is the story, like, what would be the story about a dog that lives in the town where Billy the Kid roamed at one point, right? What is the dog's perspective on the gunfight at the OK Corral, right? All of a sudden, totally different story than maybe the one that we're used to seeing. And maybe it's a revelatory story because the dog sees something that no one ever saw before, and our whole idea about how the OK Corral unfolded is totally changed because the viewpoint of that dog. And number 50 here is approach it like a physical exercise, right? So I often think about, like, art, it can be very physically demanding, right? So if you're thinking about making an artwork, how do you prepare for that artwork, right? How, if you were just like, if you're about to go do play a sport, right? There's often a lot of preparation that goes involved before you start it. Same sort of thing with making an artwork. Maybe you get all of your supplies all gathered, ready to go. You've got all of your paints mixed up. So it's like you've got this tennis court or hockey rink, and everything's ready, and then it's an explosion of movement, right? And it becomes, and you might even tell yourself, to make this painting, I want to see my heart rate double. I want to be painting on this paint. I want to see sweat dripping off my forehead while I'm working on this painting. So what do I have to do to make that work? Maybe I need to work on a bigger surface so that I can really be moving around, because if I'm just doing this, that's not going to break a sweat. Maybe I need to even be moving with my feet, right? Maybe I need to put my easel, attach it to my stationary bicycle so I can be working out while I'm painting. Yeah, is that going to mean the lines are not accurate? Absolutely, right? But that might be the way to start the painting. Maybe after you've been on the treadmill for an hour, you take it off, it's all chaotic, and then you spend the next couple of hours tightening it up and tidying it up and bringing some focus back into it. But maybe that's what you need to get the painting started. Wow, so many comments here. Angel, I don't know about this blocking thing. I don't think anybody's blocked you. I think there's just, I don't even know what's going on. Barbara says, I'm going to use some of these props with my friends' kids. I have a roll of wallpaper, backing paper to draw and paint on. I think they'll enjoy the challenge. That sounds cool. Yeah, working on a big surface, like a big roll of paper, can be really liberating because you're just like, there's endless drawings that can come out of this roll. And if I don't like what's here, I just roll that up, tear it up, throw it in the garbage, maybe put it on the kitchen table, and then I'll just eat off of my drawing. Or roll it up to put my fish and chips inside of. 58 dB, which is that Rick and Deborah, I think. So that's so cool, Barbara. Angel says tumbleweeds, LOL, dust bunnies. Well, yeah, dust bunnies, I guess, are much smaller than tumbleweeds, but you might see some dust bunnies blowing through an old western town. Angel says, by the way, Michael, I learned a lot about Billy the Kid from you. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, we did a couple of episodes on Billy the Kid. I guess they're making a Young Guns 3 or 4. I saw an interview a few years ago with Emilio Estevez, said they've got the script and they're working on that. Because that movie came out when I was, I don't know, maybe 12 years old, and starred, you know, kind of that, what they called the Brat Pack actors, Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez and Lou Diamond Phillips and Kiefer Sutherland, all those guys. Just seemed to kind of hit at the perfect time when you're just a little boy. And Mr. Jupiter says, hi, everybody. Hello, my friend. Okay, let's continue on. I know this is taking time to go through this list, but I think it's kind of important just to, you know, help give you so many different ways and ideas to progress through an artwork. So number 51 here is work in stages, pause between each stage. So sometimes people work when they, like, I often like working just all the way straight through. I like just without any breaks and stops. You've seen me do these 12-hour long live streams where I'm just standing in the same place for 12 hours painting. I like that kind of thing. But, you know, if it works, keep doing it. But if for me, let's say it stopped working and I started getting frustrated, then it's like, okay, let's do the opposite. Let's take a break every half hour, right? The Pomodoro method, where it's like, okay, you literally have timers set, and let's take a break, go for a walk, go make some lunch, make some more tea, and then come back. And sometimes that can be great. That little, just a break to see something new. Often that happens when you're making a painting and your nose is just hovering right over the surface. Sometimes just going to the bathroom, then you come back and you're like, oh, this looks great. While I was painting in the bathroom, I was just like, oh, how terrible this is. But now that I see it fresh, I don't know what the problem is. So sometimes you just need a little bit of a break to see your artwork a bit more objectively and see what's actually going on. Number 52, return to a piece you abandoned or recreate your failure. Right? A challenge could be to take the same, so let's say you make a painting and you don't like how it turned out. Well, one option would be to do it again. Try doing it again and try to take all your mistakes that you made and improve on them, fix them, and make a better painting, a better version. And an alternative would be, though, is to try to recreate, deliberately replicate the mistakes you made the first time around. I don't know, that might sound strange, but there's something about, like, when you start looking, how, actually, now that I look at it, how did I make that mistake? How did I mix that ugly color? You might find it's actually much more difficult to do it wrong than it is to fix that mistake. But sometimes by doing it wrong, you can't help but make it better. I've done projects with students where I ask them to make the best artwork that they're capable of, like their ideal of what a good artwork should be, and also to make the best or to make the worst artwork that they possibly can. And then they exhibit those two artworks side by side. And I'll tell you, 95% of the time, the rest of the class prefers their, quote, bad artwork. Because often the bad artwork is weird and strange, unfamiliar. No one's ever seen anything like that before. And people are just like, whoa, how did you do that? And they're like, well, I spilled paint on it, and I stepped on it, and I rolled it up and tore it in half, and then glued it together. And people are like, wow, look at how neat it is, all those textures, and it's so weird and strange. And usually people are like, yeah, but look at the cool drawing I did that looks like a photograph. And everyone's like, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, sure, I guess. Yeah, but it's just like everybody else can do that already. But no one's made this bad artwork before. So that can be a really interesting thing, is to try to deliberately do something bad. It's harder than you might think it is. Number 53 is to start a new version instead of fixing it. So I see this all the time with people will work on the same painting for week after week after week, and no progress is happening. They're just kind of moving stuff around. And I'll just, you know what? I think you should move on. Put this painting to the side. It doesn't mean you have to throw it out or abandon it, but maybe just put it aside for a little while and just start something else new. And almost always people are like, oh, what a relief. That painting has been like a, such a weight on my shoulder. And sometimes moving on, working on something else, I'll find them kind of like, they bring the old one back and they like because they're like, now I know what to do. I just mixed this beautiful pink color for this other new painting, and I realized this is the perfect color for this painting, and it solves it. So sometimes you just need a bit of a break, and then you realize what the solution might be for that thing that's driving you crazy. And that can be the same thing in a painting or a drawing, where you're just like, you keep fussing with an eye or something. It's like, you know what? Pause on that. Work on the hair, work on the clothes. There's still lots more to do. Sometimes you work on those areas. I find that with myself, and then I'll be like, wait a second. Okay, now there was something wrong that I meant to come back and fix. I don't remember what the problem is, because the problem sometimes evaporates because it wasn't that what you thought it was. It was that that face looked strange when there wasn't any hair around. Like, imagine doing a portrait of a famous celebrity, but drawing them with a shaved head. They're going to look kind of strange, right? If they're missing their hair. Just think about yourself. If you ever see yourself in the mirror without any hair, or with hair, it can be kind of a little bit like, oh, that's strange. So that's how a drawing can also look kind of strange. Number 54 is stop earlier than you want to. So often artists, we're always talking about like, when is it done? How do I know when I should move on? Or sometimes it's just a matter of just stopping. It could be using a timer to make yourself stop, or sometimes it's like, somebody says dinner's ready, or the food arrives at the front door and you got to take a break, or you got to stop working because you got to study, or you got to go to work, or you got to pick your kids up from school, right? Sometimes those kind of deadlines can really help, and you're just like, okay, well, I guess I'm done, right? You've seen them many times on the channel here. There's times I'm working on a painting and I'm like, I still have like 5 hours left to go, but I gotta pick my daughter up in 20 minutes. Like, what can I do in the next 5 minutes just to move on? Like, what is the last detail here? Maybe I do need to come back and work on it again, but what if I did just say this is done, right? Or I'm gonna give myself 10 more minutes and then I'm gonna walk away. 55 is continue long past when it feels finished. Sometimes that can also be really important, is to just keep working on it. When you think like, oh, it's done, just keep on going, putting more time into it. I would say generally I'd advise against that, but if you're always feeling like, yeah, I'm not happy with the work, it always feels a little bit unfinished or messy, it's like, you know what, maybe what would happen if I spent another hour on this? I bet you it might look a little bit better. Maybe I need to trust myself. Maybe I'm afraid of getting to that stage because I don't have confidence in my ability. Well, let's for one drawing, go that extra distance, go into that scary area and see what actually happens. Maybe it turns out, actually, you know what, I can do this. Oh, this whole time I was afraid of putting too much detail in or pressing too hard on my pencil because I didn't think I could pull it off. Oh, I pulled it off. Okay, so I just broke that myth. One of the things that I do in my own personal practices is when I'm working on a painting, I'll often do like 5 or 6 identical versions, or I start out with 5 or 6 identical versions of the same artwork, so that as I work on it, if I get to a stage where I'm like, wow, this looks great. Okay, well, I'm just going to set one aside. And then I'm like, okay, well, I got 5 more, and if I'm going to keep working on these 5. And then, but if I decide that I went too far on all 5, and I've still got one that's exactly what I liked at the beginning, and then I keep on working on them. I will say almost always, though, after I work on it a little bit, these other 5, I'm like, you know what, this one feels really unfinished now that I look at it. So I bring it back and put it back into the rotation. And now it's obviously going to be a little bit different because it doesn't have some of the colors the other ones do. So it's starting to kind of branch out on its own. And then that gives me so many different opportunities to continue to explore and experiment while I've always got kind of different iterations on the go. Number 56 is build the painting in layers of contradiction. Right? So using different materials and techniques, approaches, imagery, themes to contradict what you've already got. So maybe maybe you have part of the painting is done in glossy paint versus matte paint, textured versus smooth, big versus small, bright versus dark, color, saturated color versus monochrome, right? Putting in these different contradictions, opposites in there, baking that in, right? So maybe I'm making a painting of my dog. To go back to that example, I could start it with, I'm going to make the dog the most loving. I'm going to give so much love and attention to that dog, but in the background, it's going to be messy and drippy and ugly, and because that might make the dog in front kind of even more beautiful in opposition to the ugliness that maybe I've surrounded it with. Number 57 is erase and rebuild repeatedly. I talked earlier in this episode about Picasso deliberately erasing the best part of a painting out with the hope that it's going to resurface if it's really that good. So sometimes it's going in, and let's say you work on something. Matisse and Picasso often did this, right? They would do something and then wipe it out, paint a little bit more and wipe it out. I think if anything, those are great masters, and it's a little bit of showmanship and bravura, showing off a little bit, because it gives it, the painting looks like it's got lots of work involved, and often people sometimes just appreciate artwork because it looks like a lot of work went into that painting, as opposed to, wow, it's beautiful. So sometimes those kinds of things are a way of connecting with people who see art in a different, appreciate art in a different way for kind of the labor that went into it. Document each stage. So again, that's, printmakers often do this in the printmaking process, right? Maybe you're making an etching. The artists, like, we've got lots of examples of artists like Rembrandt who did this. They would make an etching, and then they would do a test print of it and look at it and be like, that area, and then they go back, clean it all out, and continue working on it, do another version. Now, that's one way of thinking about this. The other idea would be to take photographs of the artwork as you're making it. And it's totally possible that you work on a painting, you take a photograph of it, and then you paint on it for another hour, and you're like, I just ruined it. Oh. Well, there's no law that says the photograph that you post to Instagram has got to be the final version of that painting. I mean, unless you're planning on selling it or something, why not post the version of the painting an hour before you, quote, ruined it? Post that online, right? And that could be, and then maybe you destroy the final version of it, and all that really exists is that photograph of the painting at that particular stage. Work in silence. So sometimes it can be helpful just to tune everything out, right? Just to work in total quiet without any distractions. That could mean sometimes putting your headphones on but not actually playing music. I mean, some headphones now have noise canceling features that can kind of cancel the noise of cars or other people talking. It's a great way. I know some people who work in like offices who will put headphones on but won't actually be listening to anything. It's just a way of signaling to other people, like, I'm at work, please don't bother me or talk to me, right? Because you got headphones on, it's less likely somebody's going to come by and be like, hey, how's it going? What did you get up to this Friday? If you're wearing headphones, people are like, oh, I don't want to interrupt that person. It's not going to stop everybody. I'm sure some people are like, oh, I work with somebody and I wear headphones and they still talk to me. Well, that's a whole other thing. But sometimes just having kind of some quiet, like taking a drive, going out to like a forest or an abandoned park or field, and just sort of drawing there. I mean, you don't have to be drawing a bird in the field. You could be still drawing your self-portrait out there, but just having some quiet can be kind of nice. On the opposite side of the spectrum is work with distractions, noise, smells, tastes. Like what if, there's that YouTube show Hot Ones where they do interviews while people are eating spicy chicken wings? Same sort of thing. Like what if you try to make an artwork while you're eating the spiciest food you possibly can? And you're like, woo, woo, ha, oh, you're trying to, oh my goodness, your eyes are watering, drinking water while you're trying to paint it, right? I mean, it's kind of silly, but sometimes doing something like that can be really helpful, just to kind of put your mind in a different place and distract you from trying to do it perfect. Because that idea of like, well, Michael, if I try to eat spicy buffalo wings while I'm making a paint, I'm going to get it all over the painting and the drawing. It's like, yeah, probably going to drip some ranch sauce all over it. And you're like, yeah, but it's going to ruin it. It's like, well, maybe it could ruin it. But also if you tell yourself, well, it's covered in sauce, who cares about this drawing? That can be just like, well, that's so liberating. Now I'm going to throw this away. It's not going to last. So maybe you work on it for a little while, then you take a picture of it, and then you have to throw it away. Maybe you start arranging the chicken bones into something. That could be kind of cool. Like I tell my students, like, if you were hired by like a restaurant that's famous for its chicken wings and they ask you to do a poster for their business, well, you could do what 99% of other people do, is use Photoshop or Illustrator, Procreate, draw something, put in some fancy text. But if you try to make that poster using chicken wings or barbecue sauce, right? You go to the business, say, can I get a mug full of your barbecue sauce? I'm going to make an artwork out of it. They're like, okay, weird. And then you provide it to them. Maybe it's too smelly and maybe it's going to attract insects and stuff. But if you photograph it, they're like, they might put that in their advertisement or magazine because they're just like, and maybe in a little small print, this ad was made entirely with our signature hot sauce, right? Other people are like, that is pretty clever. That's pretty cool. It's certainly going to stand out from everybody else. Maybe they don't end up using it, but they might say, we love this poster you made with barbecue sauce. I think it's a little bit too adventurous for our business, but we really admire your creativity. So why don't you come in and give us some other ideas that maybe are a little bit less wild than that? And that might get you into the front of the line in front of all the other people who submitted other designs that were much more, quote, traditional. Yeah, so Barbara's saying I can't see Angel's comments either. So there you go. I mean, as I said, who knows what's going on? I wouldn't take anything personal. I think that's a good rule of thumb when it comes to the internet. Is don't take anything personal. Angel says, this is great information, and thank you for this, Michael. Hey, Mr. Jupiter, it really suits you, Rick. Nat York says, oh, what a cool topic. Glad I could catch a bit of this live. Cool. Nice for tuning in. Hi, Nat. Barbara says, I take photos after working on a painting, and it helps me spot things I missed or need to work on that I just didn't see when I was painting. Yeah, a great strategy is taking a photograph of a painting you worked on. I'll hear people always say, like, wow, it looks so much better on my phone than it does in person. Well, because what's happening is it's shrinking that whole painting down into a much smaller image, so any kind of glaring defects are minimized. It also just helps you kind of see the whole painting all at once, rather than especially when you're hovering over it, and you're just seeing kind of what you're looking at any one time. So taking a photograph is kind of, and on your phone is kind of analogous to hanging it up on the far wall and standing across the room and looking at it, right? It helps you see the totality of what you've created. Okay, so many comments here. 58, or I think this is Deborah. Michael, this has been very helpful. Thank you, Deborah and Rick. Mr. Jupiter says Mozart's last symphony is number 41, called the Jupiter Symphony. Nat says, I'm with you, Barbara. Somehow I can see things in a photo of my work that I can't see when it's right in front of my face. I tell you, that happens almost every one of these episodes. Is after I'm done, I often put that painting up in the living room, and then I'm sitting across from it, and I'm like, oh, how did I not notice how awkward that fold in the clothes, like, but you know, when I'm looking at it here, I don't notice that until later on, right? So taking that photograph is a little bit like that. It's like a time travel into that kind of situation. Deborah says, I've painted images from photos, like portraits. 2 in particular were in black and white, and I had to do lots of research in what colors to use from the time period of the photos. One example was figuring out a color of a dress in 1945. I found out peach was a common color. It was so interesting to do research. Yes, absolutely. That's really fun to do, is to try to just imagine, I've been guilty of then going and sitting in city archives for day after day, looking online for stuff, because I just get obsessed with, like, well, what would that color of the dress be? Like, what would someone typically wear, right? And then maybe you're looking at journal entries, trying to find, like, what is their favorite color or pattern that you could use to fill in some of that missing information. Okay. Next one here is emotion and meaning. So rather than focusing on imagery, what if we focus on the feeling that we're trying to convey? So number 61 is paint the mood, not the subject. So if I go back to my example of the dog from the beginning, instead of trying to do a literal one-to-one portrait of my dog, what if I say to myself, I want to paint the feeling that this dog, its companionship, offers me? What does that look like? What does companionship or friendship look like as a painting? If I say to myself, but my challenge is I'm not allowed to actually paint the dog itself. Whew. So then maybe does it become a painting of, I don't know, the dog's leash, or a footprint from the last muddy walk to the park, or what's left of its chewed up toy or bone, or the t-shirt that it likes to sleep on. Maybe it's your own old t-shirt that your dog likes to sleep on because it's got your smell in it, and then so you make a painting of that old distressed t-shirt. Again, it has no dog in it, but for you that might convey the feeling. Could be a totally abstract painting of just the colors. Maybe it's peachy cream colors. When you think of, like, friendship, that's the color that might come to mind. Or maybe it's a dog that bit you, and you have terrible memories of that. Like, the exact opposite. What would those feelings be? 62, sort of what I just talked about, is translating a memory into color, right? If you think about, again, childhood memories involving the pet you had growing up, what are the colors that come to mind? Maybe it's a pattern. Maybe it's, you think of, like, laying in bed and looking at the stucco on the ceiling of your bedroom and try to make a painting of that. Maybe maybe you had an old textbook that you wrapped in brown paper and drew on top of. Maybe you try to recreate that book cover as a painting because it reminds you of happy times in high school or something. On the other hand, here, number 63 is remove anything sentimental. So some people tends to be sort of snooty art critics, look down their nose at sentimentality, that idea of something that is just reaching for your heartstrings, and like just a painting of a little kid crying with their ice cream dripping down. Oh, I'm so sad, right? Some people are like, oh my goodness, it's just like designed purely to play on our emotions, right? I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I think that could make for a really fun painting. But if you want to go the opposite way and like, can I make a painting that has no emotions whatsoever, that is as like what we call like formal as possible? So that's what a lot of art from by the abstract expressionists might have been claiming to do, right? Of just splatters of color, and that's it. That's all it's supposed to be about. It's just about paint and color. But of course, you know, I remember when I've told the story of going to New York, and I remember seeing the Mark Rothko retrospective in person, and there were people standing in front of these big abstract color-filled paintings crying. They're like, oh my goodness, this purple and pink painting is just like, oh, it brings back so much intense feelings. And I'd be looking at them like, have you lost your mind? Right? But as I've gotten older, I kind of understand it, right? It's like sometimes those paintings, because of their lack of imagery, can bring up emotions, because you look at it and you might be like, oh my goodness, this reminds me of the time I lost my mom at the mall and I felt so scared and alone, and I remember that purple color because that was the color of the security guard who found me and walked me to the guest service counter or something, right? And so that color has like a visceral reaction to it. And when I look at a painting that's just a bunch of that color, I think, oh my goodness, it's just like, it's terrifying, right? Maybe that happens to people. Some other people are like, that's ridiculous. If you want to evoke that feeling, then paint the picture of that security guard or a little kid holding the security guard's hand, right? Everyone's got a different way of communicating things. That's what I love about art. Number 64 is add something deeply personal, right? So inject your personality into the artwork. Make it weird, right? It's, again, you know, I think about things like Frida Kahlo's self-portraits. You know, she was on a bus that got hit by a truck and it broke some bones in her back, and she was not paralyzed, but she had significant physical discomfort and challenges throughout her life. She spent a lot of her life laying in bed, and she taught herself how to make art. And so what she would do is, I mean, she's painting self-portraits, which is already very personal, but instead of just a painting that could be of just, you know, before she was famous, just of any girl laying in bed, she's like, well, what if I take my head and I put my head on the body of a deer running through the forest, and there's archers shooting arrows at it. It's like, whoa, now that is personal. That is wild. There's nobody else making that painting. I mean, obviously there's nobody else making a painting with your face on it, but there's certainly nobody making a painting with your face and this strange scenario going on. So it makes it super personal, very like enticing to a viewer to look at, because they're just like, what am I looking at? I've never seen anything like this before. So I always think one of the secrets to success is being vulnerable and expressing something deeply personal. It doesn't have to be about talking about some terrible thing that happened in your youth or last Friday or some accident or injury that you don't want to talk about. Absolutely. But it's talking about maybe being vulnerable to express what you really think or feel, being honest with yourself about what you're interested in, what you like, right? So if you're really interested in pink Easter bunnies, but you're like, I'm a 50-year-old man, like the idea of making paintings of pink bunnies is embarrassing. Like, oh, you know what? That's probably exactly what you should paint next, right? Again, you don't have to show it to anybody, but maybe you make dozens of these and you're like, you know what? These are kind of weird, and they're getting kind of good. Now I feel okay with sharing them, and people are gonna be like, whoa, I never would have thought you would have done something like that. But now that I see it, it's like they're so cool, and now I'm just intrigued. I want to see more. Tell us about these pink bunnies, right? So I think sometimes leaning into something personal is really, I would say is 99% of the time what I always encourage people to do is tell us about you. Like I always encourage my students, especially my young students at Emily Carr University of Art here in Vancouver, to explore their own cultural histories. So instead of just making another painting in the style of Picasso or Vincent van Gogh, is where are you from? What are the specific techniques and themes, imagery, patterns from where you come from? What if we bring that into your artwork? And maybe we recreate Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh in the style of a Ukrainian folk painter, right? It's like, I mean, I'm just saying that, I'm like, wow, that would be super interesting. I want to know what that would look like, right? That would be, you know, like, because there's all sorts of, as we've talked about, but let's say Ukrainian embroidery has a particular kind of look and style. But if we tried to embroider Starry Night in Ukrainian embroidery styles and techniques, I mean, that would be super interesting. So adding something deeply personal. 65 is paint what you don't understand. So deliberately going into the deep end, doing something you've never done. Maybe it's using a different technique. Maybe you've never used glazing, or you've never done paint pouring or splatter techniques or image transfers, like using like an iron to transfer image, or Mod Podge to do stuff like that. And be okay with it not turning out. I mean, ideally, you might want it to work out. Watch some YouTube videos showing people how it's done, and then just try to do it. Do something you're not comfortable, you don't understand. One of my favorite books of all time that I read when I was in college is a book called Not Knowing by Donald Barthelme. And it was so fascinating. It's that idea of, the author sort of suggests that the best place to be when you're making art is a place of not knowing, of being unfamiliar. It's like, whoa, I don't know what I'm doing. This is crazy. What have I created here? This is nuts. Like, that's my favorite place to be as an artist, is when I'm looking at it just being like, whoa. I mean, I don't know how I did this, why I did this, how this came about. This is so weird, but I must have done it. It's like coming out of some kind of dream or something, or falling into a dream. I love that experience. Now, not everybody feels that comfortable. Maybe that takes years of practice to be able to get to that place where you can let go. But I think there's something to be said about being a bit naive, just being kind of ignorant and stupid and just jumping in like a beginner and just seeing what takes place. There's, lots of artists, people get critical of like famous musicians who start painting. Like, I don't want to see Jim Carrey's paintings, or what do I care about what, I don't know, maybe Bon Jovi's making sculptures, or I know Bob Dylan was making sculptures and paintings. He's used them on the covers of his albums, and people are like, he has no right to go from being a superstar musician and making paintings. Like, he should stay in his own lane. Personally, I think it's super interesting. It's like sometimes that's a great outlet. Maybe they never exhibit those things, but maybe they become critical. Maybe they just totally abandoned making music and become an artist for the rest of their life. I know one of my favorite musicians, John Lurie, who made a couple fantastic shows. Probably maybe my favorite TV show of all time, Fishing with John. Great musician, but he's had various different health problems over the years, so performing and writing music has been really difficult, so he's become a painter. I would say his paintings are necessarily my favorite paintings of all time, but I love that restless creativity, that he's like, yeah, I can't do what what I loved to do when I was younger, but I'm not going to just sit around and just watch Netflix and scroll on Instagram for the rest of my life. I've got thoughts and feelings and stories I want to tell, and I'm going to find alternative methods to do that. 66 is express the opposite emotion. So, again, if I take this picture of my dog, and it's a picture of a dog and it's really happy, how could I take this picture and make it really like about the opposite feelings, about anger and sadness, depression? One of the paintings we've done in this class was by Yoshitomo Nara, who's a very famous Japanese contemporary living artist. And he has made all these pictures of like what appear to be kind of cute little anime girls and boys. But the way he paints them, and we talked about using, like, say, a pink imprimatura to kind of give it a strange, menacing quality to them. So it's you look at it and you're like, oh, this is a beautiful picture of a kid, but why do I feel kind of unnerved while I'm looking at it? There's something odd and creepy about this picture. We can think of stories, famous songs that are super catchy, and then you actually sit down and look at the lyrics and you're like, whoa, this is a creepy song, like Every Breath You Take by, is it Sting or The Police? And then it's like, oh, this is every breath. And then you're looking like, oh, is this, people call it like the stalker song. It's about a guy who's watching this woman, maybe when she's not aware of it, and you're just like, oh, that's kind of, I don't know how I feel about that. But that could be the same sort of thing, is how can I take this picture of a dog that I love so much and inject the opposite feelings into it, right? I don't know necessarily why you'd want to do that with a picture of that dog, but it could be a really fun, interesting challenge. Number 67, make it colder. That could be meaning, change the temperature. So make it, take that dog and put it outside in the snow. Not actually throw the dog into the snow, but just take that dog that might have been sitting on a sunny porch and now paint it as if it's sitting in the snow. Or using the opposite colors, using cool, cold colors, blues and cool reds and cool yellows. Or think about the feelings that it would evoke of coldness and distance, separation. How would you do that? Right? I'm not necessarily saying I know the answer, but that what we're talking about, these are catalysts that you can use to kind of get that spark and push it in a direction, and then you start thinking like, well, what would it mean? How could I make this picture of my dog look, quote, colder? What do I think about when I think of cold? 68 is make it more intense, bring out more intense emotions to it, right? Maybe that makes, somebody mentioned Louis Wayne earlier, that British artist who did kind of fun children's illustrations and then kind of did much more psychedelic work, which has a feeling of like, the way that like the optical illusions, like your eyes look at it, you're like, whoa, that's kind of hard to look at, like that's so intense, the way that those colors vibrate, right? Or the opposite is make it super calm. How could we take that painting and go the opposite? Instead of intensity, it just feels like Henri Matisse talked about a painting should be like a comfy chair. You look at it and you're just like, oh, that painting makes me just want to lay down in my bed and go to sleep. Maybe I'll put that painting in my bed, so when I look at it, I just feel so at peace and calm and relaxed, right? So what would it mean to make a painting like that? There's a couple I was looking at the Facebook group earlier, people talking about making a painting just like that. Number 70 is let ambiguity remain unresolved. So, you know, earlier on I was talking about how I think clarity is something really important. And I had a teacher talk about make your ideas obvious. Tell me what you really feel and think, right? This could be the opposite. Maybe you're always feeling like, oh, my paintings just feel like advertisements. They just like scream, this is what I'm thinking and feeling. Maybe I need to do the opposite. And like, how could I be ambiguous and be more mysterious in my artwork? What kinds of options would be there? Deborah says, Joni Mitchell. Yes, Joni Mitchell, great artist as well as obviously great musician. I actually got to meet Joni Mitchell in Los Angeles. She had an art exhibition and barely anybody was there, so she was standing there with Katie Lang, another great Canadian musician. The two of them were just standing in a half-empty art gallery, and I remember, this is like 20 years ago, walked in and I was just like, oh my god, like here's two of the greatest musicians as far as I'm concerned that have ever lived, Canadian or otherwise. And Joni Mitchell's made paintings and there's nobody here, so I just went up and just started talking with them. I'm like, I'm also from Canada, and they were like, I barely remember anything in the conversation because it was just like that was like one of the coolest things of all time. And because it's an art gallery, they're kind of a little bit cornered, but unfortunately this is the days before everyone had phones and cameras and stuff, but that is will always go down as a really cool moment in my life. Okay. Whoa, there's so many comments. Whoa, okay, I have to keep scrolling up here. I'm gonna try to tackle a couple of these. Deborah says, I think I answered that one. Barbara says, 1921 photo of my grandparents' wedding. The bridesmaids were wearing peach-colored dresses. Luckily, Grandma told me it was only a black white photo. Hi. Kathy's there. Hi, Kathy. Kathy says, I'm unable to do any classes online for now because of ongoing eye inflammation, and I should be on my computer. And I shouldn't be on my computer or phone. I'll listen to this episode later, at least. Yeah, well, there's not much visually going on here, so this may be as good as a podcast. Kat's going to redo the Kandinsky color study from your own. Ooh, that'd be interesting. Instead of going back to the original Kandinsky, is going to yours and try to redo that one and try to incorporate all the maybe, quote, imperfections. There's a very famous instance of Robert Rauschenberg, the American proto-pop artist. And he did a number of exercises like that where he made an abstract painting or semi-abstract painting in his own style and then tried to make an exact duplicate of it, which is really tricky. I mean, try to get those splatters or drips to drip in the same way, right? So that can be an extremely... So even all the weird mistakes, like, oh, I dropped my brush in the middle of the painting. Okay, well, try to do that again. Try to drop your brush in the exact same way. I mean, good luck, right? Yeah, Barbara says, sorry, Kathy, to hear about your eye. Or sorry, Barbara says that about Kathy, right? Yeah, sorry to hear about that. Well, you know, it's, again, thinking about what we're talking about, maybe taking a break from visual art is a good idea. And then maybe explore other creative abilities. Maybe it's writing or music, body movement, dance, right? Watching some videos on some simple Tai Chi or something. That could be kind of really relaxing as well. Kathy says, it's frustrating, but that's life. I look for the good. Thank God for audiobooks. I agree. I love listening to audiobooks. Kathy, or Deborah says, Rick and I have YouTube audio, but I really think that we put the earphones on when we want to avoid each other. I was talking about something like that earlier on. I love it. Kathy says, Deb, us too. Me listening to fiction, my husband to politics. Sinking in Purple says, I came across Frida Kahlo's self-portrait when I was practicing the structure of the face. I don't know if it's a famous portrait till... I didn't know it was a famous portrait till I completed it. I found out about it later. Awesome. Oh yeah, and Deborah says, Joni Mitchell's a great painter. Her paintings are lovely. Winter Q, could you show some of the artworks you're talking about? You know, I've been thinking about that, but you know what? This video is going on 2.5 hours already. I feel like if I just start pulling up examples online, that this is going to slow down dramatically, because you know I'll probably start getting distracted and fall down. So, I don't know, maybe I'll try to put some links in the description below, or I'll put chapter breaks and things in there, and names of things you can always copy and paste, and maybe eventually I plan on editing these videos down into something a little bit more concise, and we can put some pictures and animations, and I'll look even better. I'll have lost 50 pounds. Okay. So next up here, additional catalysts that we can combine with a spark is composition and structure. So thinking about more what we call formal qualities of an artwork, like the materials and colors and things in a painting, shapes. So number 71 is organize everything into a grid. Right, so instead of everything just sort of being wish-washy all over the place, again, we think of this dog, is if we kind of very carefully think about how it would be composed or arranged on the page. And not just the dog, but any other elements around it. And so that could mean taking, in one very literal way, it could mean taking that dog and trying to kind of put its features almost like a cubist painting, kind of spread them out into a grid-like shape, and it becomes very abstract that way. Or just thinking about kind of like the rule of thirds or the golden ratio and these kind of concepts about kind of making asymmetrical, unbalanced paintings is, you know, there's a structure underlying those artworks. So thinking about how you might allocate different elements of the painting, different colors and shapes, to different specific areas of the painting. Right, so adding a lot of structure into the painting. On the opposite side of things is breaking the grid immediately. So instead of trying to be really careful with the way things are organized, you try to do the opposite. Like maybe you cut that picture of the dog out, and then you put some glue on it, and then you turn away and you're like, okay. Put it on the painting and you're like, oh, it's only the bottom half of the dog is in the painting and the head is missing. So what could I do? Do I want to maybe have this unusually shaped canvas with the dog's head poking out one side? Or maybe I cut the picture of the dog's head off there, and then I put it on the other side as if it's like kind of looping around. It kind of goes off the top and its head appears on the bottom, right? Being way more chaotic, maybe it works. Maybe you're like, ah, this is terrible. I'm going to peel that glue off and reposition it before long. But just in that act of peeling off and repositioning it can tell you a lot about what you like and what you dislike. Because you might do that first, you're like, it's terrible. Okay, you don't have to keep it. Take it and move it and then put it where you do want. But sometimes seeing where it is, you're like, okay, I don't like that. That's really valuable information. Sometimes you don't know it until you do it. You have to do it to see it. 73 is focus on negative space only. So the negative space when we talk about art is the space around a positive shape. So if you're looking at me, we might consider me to be a positive shape, and then the space around me being negative space. Now, technically, there's curtains and windows and tables and cups and stuff that could also technically be positive shapes as well. But one way of doing, let's say if you did a drawing of me right now, would be to draw everything except for me. If you're just focusing on the negative space, you draw the curtains behind me, you draw the table and the grid on the table and the stains on the table. Maybe you draw the text on my shirt, but this me is left empty and blank, right? Same thing with that picture of the dog we talked about at the beginning. Maybe you do everything else in the picture except the dog, and you have that absence of the dog. You know, if you're trying to make a picture of a dog that has recently passed away and it brings you all sorts of sadness, one possible option is to do a painting of, take that photograph of the dog and eliminate the dog from the picture as if that dog is gone. I would say potentially that type of artwork might make you feel more emotional than just a really carefully painted picture of the dog. Because you look at it and like, oh my goodness, this makes me so sad because the dog is clearly missing, right? So for some people, that could be too emotional. For some people, it's like, I feel better about this because I don't see the dog. I just see the absence of the dog, and maybe that helps me recover because I'm not actually seeing a picture of a dog, because seeing the picture of a dog just makes me feel really sad. But when I see this empty space, it's sort of like I can project my best thoughts into that space. You may or may not disagree with what I just said there, but that's great. Everyone's going to respond to it a little bit differently. But that idea of working from the negative space is a basic drawing technique. I mean, we may even have done it in the drawing class where we just sort of, like I've done this when I was in art college. I remember teachers would just take a bunch of random stuff, a bunch of chairs and stools and blankets, and create a big pile of stuff in the middle of the room and say, okay, draw the negative space in and around this form. So illustrate little holes under the chairs, but the way those legs meet together are forming a shape. Try to draw that. It's another way of thinking about it is like trying to draw the chalk outline of a corpse on the sidewalk whenever you watch Law and Order, right? That's a positive shape, but the space around it is the negative space. So if we just focus on the outlines, then that's one way of working on that image. 74 is push everything to the edges. Typically in a painting, everything takes place usually in the center. But what if we leave the center blank and it's the outer edges that we're going to focus our attention on? Edvard Munch, the artist who did The Scream, he very famously did some paintings towards the end of his life where he had a really bad degenerative eye condition that created these big kind of black empty spots in the middle of his vision. So all he could really see is out of the corners and sides of his vision. But he didn't let that stop him. In fact, what he did is he made paintings expressing the world as he saw it. And they're really weird, strange paintings. They look like there's this alien blob right in the middle of the painting, or like it's like a portal into another dimension. And then we see, you know, parts of people and landscapes on the fringes. They're so strange and weird. But it communicates to us very clearly what his experience of the world is like. And it also, to me, speaks of like resilience, of someone who's like, yeah, I can't barely even see, but I'm not going to stop. This is the thing that brings me the most joy, so I'm just going to keep on painting. I'm going to paint what I see as I've always done it. I think it's so cool. 75 is compress the composition tightly. So compressing the image, maybe bringing the edges in. So it's, again, if we think of this picture of a dog, what if we don't eliminate the dog, but we kind of have everything around it crowding in, folding into and on top of that dog. I don't even really know what that would look like, but as a challenge, it's how do we compress that space? So let's imagine we do a picture of an interior space, and it's like in Alice in Wonderland when she drinks that potion and she grows and fills the entire room. What would it look like if that was a picture of your dog and its head is, there's the chandelier right up against its ear, and its paws are hanging right over the couch, its tail is sticking out the window, right? That could be super cool. Or the same sort of thing. Imagine it doesn't have to be inside, it could be outside, and it is just towering over the trees, and maybe it's leaning against Mount Everest, or it's rubbing its back against the mountain or something, right? Just thinking about trying to do that, all of a sudden it's the stories that start coming up. It's like, well, what's the story of this dog who's the size of Mount Everest? How did it get there? How did it get so big? Where is it from? Are there people in this world? What does it eat? A dog like that would be able to eat, a giant city's worth of food every day. How's it going to survive if it eats so much food? Number 76 is expand beyond the frame. So remember I was talking about the dog and that collage and the head coming off the image. So instead of trying to fit everything on the canvas, what if things start coming off the canvas and the canvas is no longer rectangular or square or circular shaped, but it has got all sorts of strangeness going on. So there's American artist Joseph or Frank Stella. I always get them mixed up. I think it's Frank Stella who did the big paintings / sculptures where there's just aluminum things kind of emerging from the painting. They're big, wild, unwieldy kinds of things that come into our space, which is typically not how most paintings are or behave. And that's what makes them really fun and weird and strange, playful. Sometimes it could even just mean the paint goes around the edges of the canvas and you're taking part of the depth, the width of the canvas. Some canvases are really thick, like museum frames, and sometimes people paint. There's examples of artists who painted on the frame of the painting. Paul Gauguin would make his own frames and then paint on the frames. The Les Nabis painters often did that. I remember it in the Norton Simon Museum of Art in Pasadena, California. There's some paintings by, I don't know if it's Bonnard, where they painted things that are on the frames itself, right? So the picture just kind of bursts out of the composition into our world. The frame is no longer containing things. 77 is balance everything evenly. So instead of having a chaotic picture, kind of going back to what I was saying in 71 about kind of using a grid, just imagine everything being super balanced, kind of like a movie by Stanley Kubrick. Think of like the famous scenes in The Shining where the elevator doors open and the blood spills out, but everything is very symmetrical. I always forget his name. Wes Anderson is a famous contemporary living filmmaker whose films are very symmetrical. Everything is very well balanced in the movie frame, and there's like a hyper organization that some people love, some people hate it. It's similar to like we call like a flat lay in design, where people do like, this is what's in my bag, and they'll kind of put everything and organize it very symmetrically, like on a grid. Again, I find that really satisfying. Some other people are like, oh, it's so anal retentive to organize things like that, right? Again, different people have different feelings about those kinds of things. 78 is the opposite. Make imbalance the goal. Like, go out of your way to make sure that there's nothing balancing everything. There's like a lot of black over here, but no like what would counterbalance black? White? Well, maybe I'm not going to put white there. Instead, I'm going to put something else, a weird pattern, so it's really jarring and strange. 79 is create a single focal point, and 80 is eliminate the focal point. So again, back and forth. A focal point is the center of focus of interest in a painting. So if it's a picture of a dog, it's probably going to be the dog's face. So what if we made a painting and we literally painted the dog's face right out, right? So all of a sudden, what was normally be the central focus of that artwork disappears. Can this painting still work without it? I think it's David Saleh did paintings like that. He put like a big, so it'd be a kind of photorealist painting of a person, and then put a big pink circle right over top of their face to kind of block out kind of some of those kinds of things. And so you could then either amplify the focal point, make everything pointing towards it, basically remove all detail from the background so it's not distracting from it, enlarge that dog's face so it takes up the whole composition, or going in the opposite direction, trying to hide that focal point. Stephanie says, great session today, inspiring us to push past our comfort zone. Your enthusiasm is contagious. Thanks, Stephanie. Good to see you there in the chat. Stephanie says, hello, everyone, by the way. Barbara says, yes, this has been really interesting. Deborah says, we have to leave. Good evening, everyone. Chat again soon. Have a great night. We're Rick and Deborah. Stephanie says, hi, Barbara. Yes, I always look forward to these lessons. Oh, you guys are the best. Ugh. Okay. Not much more. Probably another half hour to go here, and then we'll wrap up. So number 81. So this next section we're going to be talking about is experimentation and play. And, let's face it, most of us, when we get into art, it's because we want some sort of creative outlet, an opportunity to play, be a kid again, to have a place that is kind of where we can express ourselves, where the stakes are really low. But very quickly, people abandon that spirit of play and get all wrapped up in perfection, right? So these kinds of catalytic prompts we're going to be talking about here are things that can help kind of break out of that. So number 81 is do something you'd normally avoid. So if we're talking about a dog and you're like, but I'm always afraid of drawing fur. I always struggle with that. It's like, okay, this next painting is going to be all about that. And maybe you watch some videos online or get some books on how to paint fur, and you just make that. I'm going to focus. I want to get this. It's always driven me crazy. I can't do it. Well, instead of avoiding it and always painting dogs that look like just kind of abstract shapes, it's like I'm gonna lean into the very thing that has given me the most amount of trouble, right? 82 is push one element too far, right? So maybe it's taking one of the techniques or approaches that you've been using and just keep going. to the point, you know, past that point of like, oh, this is done or it's too far. So if that means splattering paint, instead of just splattering paint, pour the paint. If it means trying to get more realistic, it's like, okay, normally after a couple hours of painting I lose my patience, and so I just don't have the time or the interest in getting into those details. Well, you know what, this painting, I'm gonna block out 40 hours, and I am going to make this the most detailed painting I've ever made. And so it's like thinking about what is the extreme or logical conclusion of where this painting is going, and I try to just go straight there. So, you know, it's pushing it to its logical extremes. Like, what is, if I was to take this technique or this theme and go to the ends of the earth with it, or like in chess, like the end game, where is that? What would that mean? What would that entail? And so it could mean some kind of brainstorming to try to figure out what it is, but just trying to articulate that, I think, is a great idea. Number 83 is combine two incompatible ideas into the same image, or two incompatible images into the same image or idea, right? So if we think about this, my example of your favorite dog, okay, well, if we think of a paint, what is like about as opposite to your favorite dog as possible, right? I mean, some people it's like a cat, right? Or it could be, I don't know, like what is the exact opposite of a picture of a dog? Is maybe a picture of Jupiter, or a violin, or a math equation, right? And then it's like, how could I take a math equation and jam it into this picture of a dog? Could I try to make this picture of a dog out of just numbers? Could I do, like, take number stencils and use that stencil and put enough numbers on the page to the point where cumulatively those numbers are going to look like my favorite dog? Maybe. It could be a really interesting challenge. 84 is to make a bold decision early. Right? So I'm sure almost always whenever I make a painting, there's always something that kind of comes up almost right at the beginning, and I think to myself, no, that would be silly. Well, maybe this time, let's do it, right? Maybe you're getting this painting started, and you think to yourself, as you're doing the outline or drawing that dog on the canvas, you say to yourself, well, what if I just repeat this image 10 times on here? And then you do that and you're like, what a mess. But it's like, whoa, okay, now this would be if I try to actually paint what I've got drawn on this picture, 10 versions of this dog all overlapping, that is going to be really weird. I mean, it's going to look like a total mess, but if I could pull it off, that could look really kind of cool. So it's, you know, that I think it's one of the first prompts that we talked about is kind of what was it? Something about following your first instinct, right? Or not following your first instinct. So this could be kind of that first instinct is, what if I paint this dog, or this dog looks like a clown? That's funny. And being like, instead of just laughing it off, like, okay, no, let's turn this dog into a clown dog. Right? Let's make that bold decision. We're gonna make a clown dog here. 85 is undo your last move. So you do something and then paint it out, remove it. Even if you like it, remove it, and then try to do something different. In improv comedy, I did improv comedy for a few years here in Vancouver, and it was really interesting. But there's a whole improv game. I can't remember what it's called, but where you give the power to the audience to like redo something or repeat something, and you kind of rewind. And so the person might say, "I'm going to go to the doctor's," and then the crowd is like, "Repeat." And you go, I'm going to go to the doctor's," and you keep, but then you maybe rewind even before that, and then it's potential to go in a different direction. So instead of like, "I'm going to go to the doctor's," like, "I'm going to go to the shopping mart." And I'm going to buy a gallon of windshield washer fluid, right? Like, okay, let's go into a different direction, because I've gone back a step, and now I could go back down the same road, but what if I just took a zigzag in the opposite direction? 86, trust a random accident. I've talked many times about my love of Bob Ross and his concept of the happy accident. That's that same thing, is like you make an accident, and instead of just saying, "Oh, this is terrible," is be like, okay, let's incorporate this into it. Yes, I dropped my brush into the empty sky that was so beautiful, but I could spend 5 minutes trying to clean it and it might get worse. How could I leave that splatter of paint there and somehow make it work? 87 is work without stepping back. So that, again, that's, I talked earlier about like not using an eraser, for instance. It's just totally moving forward, just continually adding and not subtracting, not erasing, not fixing, not questioning what you're doing, but just move forward. I know that's really hard. Often people spend most of their time when they're making an artwork comparing, contrasting, and criticizing themselves and judging themselves. What if you just say to yourself for one artwork, "I'm not going to listen to that voice. I am just going to keep painting. I'm not going to even think about whether it's good or bad. I'm just going to complete it, and then we'll see what happens," right? Or the number 88 is step back constantly. Interrupt your flow, right? You could do something where you could say to a friend, "Hey, I want to work on this painting, but I need to break out of where I'm at right now. What I need you to do is every half hour come into my studio, pick up a paintbrush, and make a mark on there," right? And your friend's like, "Oh, I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that. Please, I'm so desperate. I need..." Like, okay, comes in and takes a blue paintbrush and goes and makes a line right through the middle of your picture. Like, okay, okay, well, now this painting's clearly out of control. Well, let's just go with it. Let's have some fun now. And that can be just like, oh, and then an hour later they come in and they put some big white, and you're like, "Ah, you just painted over my favorite part." And like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I'm like, no. I asked you to do this. This is good. This is like, it becomes kind of like a game, right? Other things you can do, again, you can use a timer, or you can use like deadlines, or you say to yourself, "I'm going to paint for 1 hour and then I've got to go to work," right? That can interrupt that flow, but you instrumentalize that. You make that part of the working process rather than just part of, you know, like this frustration that you're dealing with. You're like incorporating into as a necessary step into the creative process. 89 is make a rule and then break it. So you might start a painting saying, "I'm only going to use brown and black and white to start this painting," and then you get halfway through the painting, and then you say, "Okay, now I can use any color except brown to finish the painting off. The last 10 brush strokes, I can use any color I want," right? It's like, so you've set up kind of a structure for yourself, and then you deliberately incorporate chaos into that structure, right? You allow for it, you demand that to come in at some point. Many years ago, I did a series of collaborations with a good friend of mine in art school named Tom McGee, and so what we would do is we each had these giant pieces of paper, and I would paint on, I would paint some kind of imagery, he'd paint on one, and then about an hour later we'd swap, and then we would try to finish those paintings. We did dozens and dozens of these things, And some of them turned out great. Some of them were terrible. They were weird, ugly. But it was just such a fun kind of thing of just being like giving up that control and just being given somebody else's work and trying to resolve it. And 90 is repeat until it becomes absurd. So another activity is very common in art school is somebody might say, okay, this is a beautiful drawing. Now do it 50 more times. Like, what? 50 more times? It took me an hour to do this one. Okay. Sure, you could, but that could take you, you know, if this one took you 50 hours, are you really going to spend 50 hours on all 50 of these? I mean, that's what, 500 hours or more, right? So, or 5,000 hours? So what you'd have to say to yourself is, okay, well, maybe the first one I'm going to spend 50 hours. Maybe the next one, though, after doing it, I'm only on number 2. Can I do this one in 10 hours or 2 hours? And then by the time you get close to being done, some of those last drawings you're going to do in 30 seconds because you're just like, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to move on. But you know what? You might look at the ones you did in 5 minutes and be like, 30 seconds. I don't like these. But at the same time, you might look at it and be like, actually, every time I did it, I was reducing and reducing and reducing and distilling my idea down to its most important qualities. And on my 50th drawing that took me 1 minute, it's got everything I want in there. All of the extra stuff has been strained away, and I've got the essence of my idea boiled down to this, you know, fine, this little diamond shape. Okay. So, last set of catalytic prompts here. So this last set of prompts is all related to identity and you yourself as an artist and the point of view that you bring to your work. And some of this is kind of similar to some of the things we talked about before, but you know, number 91 is paint as if you were a beginner, right? Picasso talked about how he spent his whole life learning how to paint like a kid again and to kind of deburden himself of all the skills and training he had acquired through his life. For some people, that's like absurd. Like, why would you want to paint like a child? Well, a lot of artists, you know, we think about being a kid is often that time where we were just so free. We didn't care what anybody thinked. We would just have fun, just scribbling and making a mess, painting on our hands and on our faces. It was just pure fun, unbridled joy. And so if you think about going back to that moment when you were a total beginner, and I don't mean like as an adult and like I've just started your drawing class. I mean like when you were 4 years old, right? I got a 6-year-old daughter, and you know, she still loves to scribble and make big messes and get paint all over herself and eat the paint or crayons. So it's like, and I look at that, just the enthusiasm and the joy, like the how interesting just the mixing of colors appears. Things that I take for granted, for her, it's just like, whoa, look how those colors, every time I spin, those colors mix and they're turning into a new color. It's just, and so it's trying to see the world like a kid again, and to take appreciation of those little things that we miss, right? It can be also very liberating, because if you just try just to paint without that kind of judgment, it might allow you, give you permission to do things you normally don't allow yourself to do. Number 92. Actually, you know what? I just gotta charge my phone here. So where was I? Number 92 is paint as if you were a master. So the exact opposite is how would you imagine an artist like Frida Kahlo would approach a painting? I mean, that's kind of like how this whole course is all about. These master studies is me trying to put myself into the mindset of one of these artists and try to understand, the context in which they made their painting. That's why I spend so much time talking about biographies and the kind of the political, social landscape in which they grew up and were making artwork, or that specific artwork. Like, were they working in a basement during World War II and there's bombs crashing down, and yet they're making just beautiful pictures of flowers? How does that, knowing how it was created, influence the way that painting was made, or even how it's perceived? Right? I think if you're a great master, you probably spend a little bit more time preparing the surface, right? Kind of getting it just right before you begin, right? You might just give it a little bit more care and attention that you might not do when you're a beginner, because you're just like, I'm just making fun, I'm just being a little bit messy. Whereas a master is often much more methodical, right? Again, this might be something that's maybe for a more advanced artist to attempt to do, number 92. But I think even just thinking about that's something that I try to incorporate into these lessons, as trying to put myself in that artist's boots for a little while. That's kind of what number 93 is: borrow the mindset of another artist. Right? Especially mindset of an artist who might be from a different culture or time period, different country, community on the other side of the planet. Trying to think about what is important to them, what are they trying to say and express, what kind of sort of struggles or challenges are unique to them or their community, and how can knowing that influence the artwork that I create, right? I find all that kind of stuff super, super fascinating. It also just gives me a great deal more empathy for other human beings. If I can kind of project myself into their mind for a little while, I can kind of have a bit of empathy, understanding for what they went through. 94, work as if teaching someone else. I think we covered this a little bit earlier on, is that idea of if you have to explain it to somebody else, you end up having to kind of talk in the most kind of simple, straightforward language possible. And that forces me anyway to really clarify my thoughts as much as possible. Like, if I'm talking to one of my colleagues at the university I teach at, I talk in a very different way than I might be talking right now, because we already have a shared understanding in language. We both went to college and graduate school, so I can kind of use certain kinds of terminology that we're both familiar with that might explain a whole concept that other people maybe watching right now might not be familiar with, right? So, but that is one of the difficult things sometimes. Is it can be one thing to understand an idea or a concept or a technique. Teaching it or explaining it to somebody else is a whole other thing. Is trying to figure out, where do I even start? How do I talk about some of this stuff to people who might not have any prior knowledge or background in it whatsoever? It's like trying to explain the taste of pizza to a space alien. It's like I don't know, where do you even begin, right? As opposed to trying to explain the taste of pizza to a chef. They're already like, oh, I understand what these flavors or work, and I could kind of build that together. But explain to somebody who's never eaten food before, right? How do you explain those kinds of things to them? So it forces you to kind of get right to the most basic things possible. And one of the things that happens when you try to explain something like that is it sometimes causes one to kind of question maybe some of the assumptions that one has made along the way. Because you start explaining, you're like, well, I've just always done this technique, but what am I really doing here? Do I really need to be doing this? Now that I'm teaching somebody, I kind of realize how pointless this exercise is, right? And so that's stuff I think about all the time, because I particularly enjoy working with people kind of at the beginning of their creative journey, because it really forces me to be really clear about what my own thinking and process is. And I've found that to be really helpful for me, because one of the things when you graduate from art school, sometimes you feel like, I don't know anything. I don't have any practical employable skills. I mean, I know how to color stuff, but like that's not useful for anything. But then I start trying to explain some of the things, concepts I do, and then it can be kind of like, oh, actually I have a pretty complex understanding about how color works that most other people don't have. So as I explain it, I become kind of aware of what I know already. And that can be kind of a bit of a relief. It's like, oh, actually I did learn a few things in all those years of art school. And 95 is ignore your usual style, do the opposite. So that's pretty straightforward. If you've always been painting abstract paintings, try to make something that is realistic. If you've always been painting something that is more conceptual, right, and has all these big ideas, try to make something that is as straightforward as humanly possible, that doesn't require an art history degree to understand. 96 is push your style to an extreme, right? So if there's a particular kind of quality of your work that you kind of are starting to recognize, is to take that quality and just amplify it. So an example would be kind of like in anime and manga. Right now, since kind of like the 70s, there's been this kind of stylistic convention of really big eyes in Japanese comic books and animation. And most of my students at university, they're 17, 18 years old. They are obsessed with manga and anime. And so that's their style of drawing is like that. So what I think is like, okay, that's interesting, but there's already literally millions of people who are using that same style. What if you did something that was different? Like, what if you took those eyes and you just enlarged them so big that that's all that fits in a comic book panel? Or we go the opposite way, is just a kind of maybe we remove the eyes entirely. Just, can we do an anime manga style character that has no eyes? If that's the most iconic, identifiable part of that style, that genre of art, let's take it right out. You can't even use it anymore. Okay, how, if we continue drawing, is there going to be any manga anime qualities left? I would say there absolutely, but it would be really interesting to kind of give yourself that challenge. Number 97 is make your ideas theme clear, obvious. I think I've talked about this before a few times now, is, be explicit about what you want to say. Number 98 is make it strange and unfamiliar, right? Do something that you look at and you're like, oh, I think this could be the worst thing I've ever done, or genius, right? That's the kind of line I like writing. I like kind of being in there because my hope is if it's unfamiliar to me, then it's certainly going to be unfamiliar to a lot of other people. And sometimes just being strange for the sake of strange and weird just to be weird, provocative without any kind of substance is not that interesting. And that might happen. But then maybe I might go back and revisit some of those ideas and try to draw or bring out the strange thing in there without just being strange for the sake of strange. That it's like I'm saying or doing something with this unique quality that I've discovered there. There's like a concept called the Unheimlich and the Heimlich, like that Freud wrote about, the uncanny, the fantastic, things that are familiar but unfamiliar. They can give us that anxious kind of feeling. You see that all the time in horror movies. Stanley Kubrick was great with that kind of thing of, you know, like, it's just a hallway, but there's something really creepy about this hallway, right? It's sometimes people might compare it to like the deja vu feeling of like, I swear I've been, you know, like you might be backpacking in a different country. You've definitely never been there before, but you're like, whoa, I just had this feeling like I have been down this street before. Wow, this is so weird, right? Or you see something in a book, maybe somebody's artwork, and you're like, wow. Or maybe it's a song, you're like, I swear I've heard this song before, but this is a brand new song? That's so weird. So I kind of like that in my paintings. I like when it feels like it's always been there, but of course it's never been there because I just created it. But I always have this feeling of just like it like almost instantly after creating something, it's like, feels like I did this painting 20 years ago, but it literally is 5 minutes old. And I love that feeling. It feels like it's familiar because I've created it, but it's also really unfamiliar because there's no way it couldn't have existed before. I've never seen anybody do this before. And sometimes that can be nice, because that could be a telltale sign that this is going to work really well. Because if it's like a pop song that is like, yeah, it's a new song, but it feels like I've heard it before, and that helps kind of catch you into it, right? Number 99 is simplify radically. Take every possible element. Minimalism is kind of about that, is reduce it to its absolute pure essence. No extraneous details remain. You know, think about like our dog example. Like, what things can you take away from a dog, a picture of a dog, until that dog has 1% dogness left? Like, is it the dog's nose or ears or fur or tongue sticking out? Is it its paws, its shadow, the reflection in its eye, its smell, the sound it makes when it's breathing or howling or whining? What is the absolute bare essence of that dog that defines a dog from a wolf or a cat or an elephant or octopus? What can we reduce it to? And that's all that's left is dog, right? And then number 100 here, the last one on this list, is ask yourself, what would make this artwork unforgettable? And that could be all sorts of different kinds of things. Some of it could be just really shocking. Well, I could make a painting of a dog, and then if I just splash chicken blood all over it, well, obviously it's going to be unforgettable. People are like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. It smells and it's got blood on it. That's gross. People aren't going to forget that. I would say that's a bit more on the easy side of things. It's like, okay, sure, yeah, you could throw blood on it. That would make it unforgettable. But what are some other ways that we could make this painting feel unforgettable? Is it because of the intense amount of detail that you put into it that just makes people like, whoa, you're the best artist I've ever seen. I'll never forget this painting. It's going to keep me up at night. Is it because it's a haunting portrait that just feels like, whoa, I feel like this dog is looking at me when I walk around the room, or something like that? Or is it because it's so beautiful, so it brings up so many kinds of intense emotions that people won't forget it? Maybe it's the title. Maybe the title, I mean, it's just a picture of a dog, but the title is, I don't know, the dog that saved my life, right? And so somebody looking at it like, whoa, what's the story of this dog that saved your life, right? Now it's unforgettable. They want to talk to the artist, and they want to look up, like, how did this picture of it, why is this, it's just a picture of a dog, but it says it's the dog that saved my life. Like, and it's like, oh, well, it turned out that I was really sick with cancer, and a friend died, and I took on their dog by going for walks and getting outside with this dog. I went back to get my tests, and it turned out my cancer went into remission, and this dog saved my life. We're like, whoa, what a powerful story. But it's just a picture of a dog, right? Maybe that's, on the label that comes with it, right? So all sorts of different ways that can go. Okay. So once we've taken our prompt, right? So I just go back. So if I go back here, we start with a spark, right? It could be really anything, whatever it is that you choose. And for example, all I did was I said, my favorite dog, that's my spark. And then one of the catalysts in this list that we just went through, those 100 different ideas, if we do that and we're like, okay, I got a great idea. This is cool. Let's make this painting. But it's also entirely possible that you get through that process and you're like, yeah, none of these ideas are interesting. I don't really know if I want to do a picture of my dog after all, right? Then that's okay. Let's go back. Let's find a new spark and combine it with maybe the same catalyst or something else. But even just going through that process and eliminating, let's say, the dog from your consideration is helpful, because you're like, okay, well, maybe we're not going to do an image of a dog or a pet or even of any kind of living object. Let's do an old toy that we've got in the house, or it's a landscape picture, right? Or it's an abstraction. So sometimes identifying what you don't want to do is just as important as identifying what you do want to do. Oh wow, look at all these comments here. Slashy says, hello, mister. Christina says, hello, everyone. Tatiana says, a precious session, Michael. Thank you. I have to leave. It's past midnight here, and I will watch later. Awesome. Yes, absolutely. All these videos will be up forever. Christina says, I'm going insane trying to finish this mural I've been working on. Never again. And I've been missing this group. That's a big project. I'd love to see some examples on the Facebook group. Take some pictures of this mural you're working on. Maybe we can help you, motivate you. I'm sure people will love it. Yeah, Kathy says, post pictures when you're finished, Christina. Eeper says, this man is a genius. Nothing and none helped to wake the artist inside me, but this fantastic teacher and his amazing courses. Oh, no one. Okay, sorry. Nothing and no one helps to wake the artist inside me, but this fantastic teacher and his amazing courses. Thank you so much, Michael. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate that. That's, wow. That's a very kind thing to say. Thank you so much, my friend. Eeper says, I truly hope more people will find your channel. Only you actually helped me to understand that I can draw and find the right path. Oh my goodness, that's such a, wow, that's really beautiful. Thank you. I'm really deeply honored that you would say something like that. That's really cool. Wow. I don't know what to say. That's really cool. Thank you. Yes, I'm not often stumped for words, as you can see after talking for 3.5 hours straight. Barbara said, couldn't have been better. So Barbara says, so interesting session, Michael. Thank you so much. Okay. So there's a few more. I'm going to continue this whole. I'm going to get through this whole thing here. So, the next step, we've got a spark, we've taken a catalyst, we've mixed them together. The next thing we want to do is create some iterations, some variations on that theme to kind of test our idea, right? Most people, when they start a project, they get an idea and they're like, okay, let's just do it, let's run. And that is one of the catalysts, is just follow your first instinct. And sure, that can be great, but I see this all the time from my students at Emily Carr, is they've got an idea and they just start doing it, and then they spend 40 hours on it only to realize that they're not actually really interested in their original idea, or that there's problems with it that could have been solved much earlier on if they just did a little bit of brainstorming through that idea, of testing it. So I've put this big list down here. I could do another video literally about this exact topic here, but I think some of these are kind of strategies to kind of test your idea. So really one of my favorites, and what really applies specifically to this channel, is this idea of using thumbnail sketches. I've done this many times before, but thumbnail sketches are literally kind of the way it sounds, like sketches that could fit on a thumbnail. And because they're not usually so small, but the idea is to make them as devoid of detail as possible. Just a big overview of what potentially could look like, what the composition could look like, and doing 4 of those, 40 of them, 400 of them. Doing a bunch of them gives you a whole bunch of different options, and you can see how or if those ideas are working at all. You look at it and be like, okay, this works, this works, this works, but this doesn't work. Okay, maybe I need to go back to the drawing board because none of this is going to work. Next thing would be like, similar is like stick figures, just simple little chicken scratch drawings. Working on silhouettes, just drawing the silhouette of shapes so that you can see what they might look like on the page. Blind drawing is the way it sounds like. You just take your idea and just start sketching it. Yeah, it's going to probably look like a big jumble of lines, but by doing that, it's just getting the project started. And you look at it, you might be like, well, I was planning on doing a realistic drawing of this dog, and now it looks really strange. But I kind of like this weird doodly image. Another thing is one continuous line drawing. So that's a drawing where the pencil never comes off the surface of the paper. So doing drawings like that can put you in a different kind of headspace. It could be a little bit more meditative because it's about just one continuous line. Everything is connected into one. Maybe slightly more word-oriented might be making lists of things, brainstorming, mind mapping, word association. What does this remind me of lists, right? Kind of however you want to brainstorm, whether that's kind of like a cloud with lines coming off, or you have columns, lists, whatever works for you. But sometimes taking that idea and just exploring what are the possibilities. Like many of the things I've talked about with some of those catalysts is 4 or 5 different directions, pop off immediately with just that one catalyst. It's like I could go in all these different directions. So sometimes laying out what those different directions could be is just really clarifying. It just helps kind of give some direction or potential directions. Another one, automatic writing or the cut-up method. Those are methods used by the surrealists, as well as like artists like William S. Burroughs and the beat writers would use this kind of stuff, like just write stuff down, cut the text up, rearrange it, kind of like those stickers or magnets that you can buy for your fridge that have words on them, and you're rearranging words, right? If you kind of come up with your idea, just write that idea down and then cut it up and rearrange it, and think about how even just the rearrangement of words could completely change your concept of where you go. Improv comedy, improv music. I find I did improv comedy when I was younger, and I've done improvisational performances. I find that really helpful. I think everybody should take an improv comedy course. just to learn about like how to think on your feet really quickly and to not reject ideas, try to spit them out and spin them into something and try to make sense of them. Same sort of thing with Toastmasters. I don't know if you've heard of Toastmasters, but that's, a lot of business people take Toastmaster courses. You can look up Toastmasters online. It's basically people will come into a room and they're kind of given public speaking prompts. So they might just say, okay, today what I want you to do is write about dry erase board, or give me a 5-minute discussion about dry erase boards. Hands up. Okay, everybody, hello, nice to see you guys. Today I'm here to talk about dry erase boards. Dry erase boards were invented in 1783 in Luxembourg, and you try to talk for 5 straight minutes, just inventing stuff off the top of your head. But by doing that kind of thing, you get more comfortable talking in front of other people, less worried about making a mistake because you're just inventing stuff. It just helps you kind of create connections literally out of thin air. Other ways you can come up with or test your ideas is dream on them. Think about if you can. I mean, it takes some time to learn how to do kind of lucid dreaming, but so it could just be daydreaming. And one of my favorite things to do, and a lot of artists talk about this, is the importance of going for a walk. There's all sorts of famous examples throughout history of political leaders faced with some sort of crisis and then going for a walk. Here in Canada, there's Pierre Trudeau had a famous long walk. I think Winston Churchill had a famous long walk. And lots of artists talk about going for walks. What's his name? The author Murakami. The guy who wrote like the Wind-Up Bird Chronicles, he wrote a whole book called like What I Think About When I Talk About Running, I think it's called. And it's just great hearing about how an author uses physical activity to help him develop ideas. And sometimes it's just a break, a meditative quality of getting away from the act of trying to be creative, and sometimes it inspires. It's the engine that makes creativity work. And then lastly, I know it's kind of controversial, but artificial intelligence. It's not going to go away, and it's a great way you can test your ideas, put it into any of the different large language models that we have today. Have a discussion about your idea with the computer. See what it says, what ideas it generates. That's the idea behind ChatGPT, is that you chat with the computer about an idea. And that can help you see whether your idea has potential, or it starts spitting out stuff. You're like, I don't like where this is going. Well, then maybe the idea could be revised. Okay, how much time I got? 5 minutes. I don't know if I can get through all of this. Next step here is to evaluate the stickiness of your idea, right? So you step back, look at what you've got, your sketches, your ideas, your brainstorm, and then compare what the results are, right? Do you think this is going to work? Like, which of you've done a bunch of thumbnail sketches or brainstorming, coming up with sentences, dreaming, what just keeps coming back? What can't you ignore? What is, like Stephen King talks about not writing ideas down. He's like, if I just can't get an idea in my head, I have to write something about it, because it feels alive. It won't go away. It's like a bug that keeps biting you, right? There's something there, right? And if none of them stick, don't force it. Start again, right? This idea is you're not waiting for inspiration. You're engineering it. You're trying to bring it out of you. So you're not just sitting around waiting for the world to tell you what to do. You're actively going to try to find it. Next step here would be to think about the level of complexity that is going to be required for this artwork. So you ask yourself, it's important to define your challenge, right? So you say to yourself, what is my goal with this artwork? Is it just going to be a quick little study that I'm just going to do for myself and never really show anybody, or just an experiment that is just kind of just for fun, to test my materials or my ideas? Or is this a must-win? If are the stakes really high? Do I have an exhibition in a month from now and I haven't started? Is this the time to really do something really weird and wild outside of my comfort zone? That might be pushing it, right? Because maybe the threshold for failure is pretty limited. I've got to get a win here. Maybe I don't want to do something that is going to require a lot of extra time and fiddling and confusion. Number 6 is to make a decision to commit, is to say, okay, you know what? I've got an idea. I've tested it a few times. I like where it's going. Let's go all in. Push all the chips into the center and just do it. And because at some point you've got to stop or pause generating ideas. You got to stop kind of sitting in the library doing research and reading and trying to like, maybe I should do this. Just like, you know what? Make a decision and do it. Commit. Just and see it through. It could be for a few hours or a week, but do it, and then you won't be like, I wonder if I do this, what it's going to look like, because you've done it. And then now that you've answered that question, and maybe that means you can go forward and you've broken through new territory, or maybe it means you've run into some sort of wall. So what do you do when you hit a wall or you stall out? How do you keep moving forward? How do you get that momentum back? Well, instead of overthinking things, one of the things you can do is introduce some disruption. And that means kind of going back to kind of what we were talking about before, is to potentially go back to some of those catalysts, mix in another one, and to try to see if there's a way out of this situation you're in. And if not, maybe it's time to start over, go back to square one and find a new spark, a new catalyst, and go in a different direction. But often it's something you've kind of hit a wall, and it's like, and that wall might appear just to go on in both directions infinitely. But maybe there's a way to go over the wall, under the wall, or through the wall itself. Maybe that wall actually isn't there. You just perceive it there. It's an illusion. And all you got to do is just keep moving forward, and you're like, oh, why was I so worried? There wasn't anything there to begin with, right? So try bringing one of those catalytic prompts back in, throw it into the mix, and see if that gets things going again. Number 8 here is just surrendering, is to once you've committed to that idea, is to surrender to the artwork and let it take over. So I mentioned earlier, sometimes I literally, I'm talking to my own artwork, asking it what it wants rather than trying to make it do what I want to do. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I think every artwork gets to that point. I think of this as like children, and sometimes you just have to let it be what it is, embrace it for what it is, and not for what you wanted it to be when you started, right? And that, if you can just let go of like, I was trying to paint a dog, but now it looks like a wolf. I'm a failure. It's like, okay, well, maybe it's a wolf now. Let's turn it into a painting of a wolf. Who cares? It was supposed to be a dog. We can always go back and make a painting of the dog you want later on, but now we've got a wolf. Instead of sitting around trying to erase it and being angry with yourself, maybe that's the direction we should go, is to try to make a painting of a wolf. So what we're doing then is adjusting, editing, and then discovering really what you've got, right? Because it might not be what you intended it to be. You've probably created something totally unique, as every artwork actually is, if you've really listened to that artwork. I mean, the goal is not to follow the rules, it's to reach a point where you don't need those rules anymore. That you've kind of set this whole structure, this framework that we've been talking about for the past 3 hours. You start it, you get it in motion, and sometimes there's those guardrails are helpful to kind of get the ball rolling. But once it's going, it becomes its own living entity, and that's the importance of listening to it as it is and not trying to force it to be something else. And the last couple ones here is, once you've gone all that way, you can stop, you can reflect, and then discover what you've actually got here, right? So this is a really important thing in like art school, is kind of doing a self-evaluation of the work, is looking at anything like, okay, what worked? What surprised me? What failed? And like, what mistakes can I learn from? And sometimes it can be literally good to take a pencil and paper out and write down those things, because if they live in your head, they're kind of these amorphous, undefined ideas. If you say them out loud, it makes them real, and then you can kind of start to understand these things. So I'm a strong believer in doing this kind of thing. That's why a lot of artists write about their work, is it's a way of externalizing their ideas and making them concrete, because painting often, or drawing, music, can, even if they're representational, can still be kind of ambiguous. So forcing yourself to put those ideas into words, especially after having done work, to help you understand what you've created is really important. And then lastly, it's really important to continue, is to repeat, right? So, and to repeat endlessly, keep doing it, not giving up. Right? Once you've created something, you look at it, you evaluate what worked, what didn't, and then you can decide, okay, these are great. The pictures of this dog that I did are awesome. Let's make a whole bunch. Let's make a whole series of artworks like that, right? And then maybe you decide, well, I'm going to take another little direction and mix this into the pot and see where this goes. And you keep pushing it and pushing it further until you've exhausted that direction. And then you go back to square one, and then you start maybe with something else, a new idea, a new theme, new image that you then push into another direction. But it's important that you continue this, that once that momentum gets going, it's like a self-perpetuating or perpetual motion machine. It'll run forever. Okay, everyone, I have to run here in 2 seconds. Just a quick reminder to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when future episodes like this are going to take place. We're going to do a painting episode. Well, I got some ideas in mind. Actually, maybe related to this. It might be the next episode. Maybe even tomorrow. We'll see. Consider leaving a donation. You can use the PayPal code here, the QR code, scan that or enter in that web address. And it's going to take you right to this page where you can safely and securely donate to support the channel. And if you want to use something other than PayPal, you can send an e-transfer via email or a check in the mail, or use the YouTube Super Chat while we're here live, as some people have done today already. My email is on my website and the Facebook group. So speaking of the Facebook group, I encourage you to scan this QR code, join the Facebook group, enter in one of those web addresses there too. They all take you to the same place. Take a photograph of whatever you've created lately, upload it to our group. There's a couple thousand people from all around the world who are at different creative points in their journey who would love to see what you've created. It's very inspiring to see what people are doing. This is what the Facebook group looks like, and again, I highly encourage you to do. You don't even have to post anything. You can just join the group and get inspired by what other people are creating. Okay, let's see. So I have got to run. I got to go pick my daughter up from school, and then we're going to go for a big swim. So thank you so much for keeping me company the last few hours and listening to me prattle on about how to come up with ideas. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time. I know there's a bunch of comments there in the chat. I don't have time to answer them, but thank you so much for participating. You know, anytime you're looking at art, thinking about art, talking about art, you are doing yourself, firstly, a major favor, but you're also helping to spread positivity within your community, constructive energy, constructive behavior. That's the antidote to all of the negativity and violence in our world today. So the more that you are pursuing creative goals in your own creative journey, the more you're helping to make this world a better place for us all. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful morning or evening, wherever you happen to be on our beautiful planet. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.